Phil? Okay.
Sorry we messed it up in the first
Don't
one.
worry about it.
Did you do Bella 3 times?
I call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Not nearly.
I am asked again, in accordance with the open meeting law, the board states for the record that this meeting is being recorded by NORCAM and may be recorded by other local media. Oh, thanks. Thank you, Michael. I'd like to welcome our guests here this evening and those watching on cable. First item on our agenda, excuse me, is courtesy hearing and a new street light location on Naperville and North Street. Mr. Gilberto?
Mr. Chairman, so we received an inquiry from a resident with regard to a request for a street light not to be turned back on, but a new street light installation to occur at the intersection of Novelis and North Streets, just outside the town hall here.
Mm-hmm.
You have in your packet reports from the town engineer and the safety officer from the police department with regard to their opinion on the need at the location, and both supported the request. There is a light, a street light in the vicinity there. It is further west on North Street, kind of diagonally across from the intersection. A number of us have driven the area. It is dark at that intersection, there's no doubt about it, and there is a recommendation in here. You also have before you a notation with regard to the cost. There isn't a cost for the installation. There is obviously the charge for the electricity, which I believe was estimated at $2.60, if I saw it correctly, I believe per day.
Now, is this going to be
Per
LED
month,
lighting?
per month, excuse me, per month.
Michael?
I'm sorry?
Is this going to be LED lighting?
It would be. It'd be a new installation, which will be an LED street light put in by RMLD. One thing I would note is that there's no statutory requirement for a hearing for the location to be added, but where this was generated from a resident, we elected to offer a courtesy hearing, which involved notification to the abutters of the immediate vicinity to make them aware of it. And some of them may or may not be here this evening.
Are there any abutters on this location here this evening? I guess not. So what's the next step?
So we have in the packet a request for a vote
A motion?
to be approved by the board, a motion
Just a question.
to approve the installation.
Mr. Briscoe?
I probably should have read through the package a little more in detail. It may be in here. RMLD is okay with doing this.
We would be making the request to
Oh,
them
okay.
to
So
install.
you haven't done that yet.
That's correct. We were waiting for approval from the board to do so.
This
So-
is a little different than what we discussed before. If we went townwide with LED lighting, we could afford to put all the lights that we shut down back on. This is actually an additional, was never there.
Right, so there's no infrastructure, there could potentially be an infrastructure issue. I know, there's a huge scorpion running over the desk here, so, sorry, I know it's a little unnerving, that's actually very sizable. So,
I know it's not.
and if my wife was here, she'd be going out of her mind. If you want to take a minute to squash it, so.
No, somewhere
You don't
else.
know, I think you went behind the
Yeah.
curtain. Oh, you got it?
I got it.
Oh, good.
Thank
Do you feel better, Catherine?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so the point I was trying to make was, by having this little hearing this evening, we're not giving any false sense of, that we're gonna guarantee that it can happen, right? Because we need RMLD to say whether it's feasible from an infrastructure standpoint. Because we don't know what's down there, where they can pull it from, if there's even a pole in the location that it would have to go in.
I'm assuming it's going on a pole.
That's correct. There's an existing pole at that location.
Because I didn't see it, unless I missed it, I didn't see it.
It may not have been noted, but there is a pole that's kind of behind the tree at that location, if I'm not mistaken.
Great. Let's
Again,
make it happen.
yeah,
I'm good.
anything can happen. Our MLD could have some operational reason that we're not aware of, but to the best of our knowledge, there's a pole there with electric service on it that would be able to support this.
It does say that in the packet. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. It says that they commented on it too. And it said that it's included in the rate, the initial installation
Mhm.
cost.
Mr. Yule?
Yeah, is it standard procedure that the town approve light poles? Or is that just in this case? Does the thank you, RMLD, do they need our approval to put poles up?
We're not putting a pole up.
Well, that's true, I mean, but I'm just tying it together. But is it normal for us to be required to vote on having lights being?
Yeah, it's a budgetary item, Jeff, in
Okay.
terms of the number of streetlights. And back, long before I think I got on the board, maybe sometime during Steve's tenure, in the interest of saving some money, a number of streetlights were shut off.
Right, I know, I
Right.
remember we made that
Right.
decision too.
So here we are tonight, talking about adding a streetlight, not putting back one that's been previously removed, but adding another one.
You know,
Yes.
Kate helped me find, I don't know how I missed it, but, yeah, we're only talking $30 a year to have this thing on, so it's a no-brainer.
Right, not only that, as we move forward over time, we're gonna all be on LED, and we're actually gonna save some money. So,
Thank you, Kate. for
It's
filling
going on to an existing pole too.
Yeah.
What's that?
The pole's already
Yeah.
there.
Well, the
right.
pole's there, and again, generally, our MLD will put the light up and then collect a monthly fee. It's like $2.60 a month. And generally what happens is, if there's a request such as this was the case, the safety officer would go out, take a look at it, see if it warrants the light. He's recommending that it does.
Right, I saw that.
And then it comes to the board for approval, and then a formal request goes to RMLD to put it in.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So, further discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the installation of a new streetlight at the intersection of Navalis and North Streets.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
I like these mics.
Okay, we have Kitty's Restaurant, change in manager. Do we have representatives from Kitty's here this evening? Go to the podium, please.
It's Mr. Scott White.
What?
Scott White.
Oh, Scott, yes. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
Can you explain to us?
Well, we were asked if we could, seeing that I'm at the restaurant all the time, they wanted to change the liquor license into my name. Previous, it was in Rita's name, and she's not there too often. She's still one of the owners, but she's not there too often, so we're gonna put it in my name if that was possible.
Okay. Have you been tips qualified?
Myself?
Yes.
Yep.
He's only been there for about his whole life.
100 years.
Yeah, he's only been there for about his whole life.
41 years.
Yeah, he's only been there for
Okay.
41 years. But,
You must have written the book on tips.
yeah. But,
Just to
Mr.
clarify,
Gilberto?
this isn't changing an interest in the license, it's changing the designation of the manager of the establishment.
Right. Not changing the type of license, anything.
Not the type of
Yeah.
license and not the ownership of the license, just the management.
And again, the ABCC generally requires the manager to be there a certain number of hours. Mrs. White is in semi-retirement at this particular
Mhm.
point in time, and Scott is far from semi-retired and is there most of the time. So it makes more
Right.
sense that the license go in his name.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? I'll entertain a motion, Mrs. Mentelli.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the change of manager for the common victualler all alcohol license for Kitty's Restaurant, 123 Main Street, from Rita White to Scott White.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you, that was
Good luck.
pretty easy. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Okay. Still running a little behind, but we have a meeting with our auditor to review FY 2016 financials. And And do we want to have him sit there with the microphone so you can, rather than stand at the podium, it might be easier for you.
See,
Well, first, thank you for letting us do the audit again this year. So as usual, please feel free to ask any questions, interject a comment. I think these work better as a discussion instead of a presentation, so I don't mind being interrupted. The management letter is in like 3 parts this year. There's two comments that have dealt with internal controls, 2 that are informational items, and the rest of the report is a status of the prior year's comments. I like to add the prior year comments in the status because it shows that the town takes serious the management letter and generally implements the recommendations decided before the next audit season rolls around. So the first management letter comment has to do with the warrant process. Occasionally, a payment has to be made that can slip through the warrant process. An example might be a debt payment that can't wait till the next warrant. And it might be a debt payment that is scheduled and has to be made on a certain date and missed the warrant. So right now, what happens is the treasurer will do a wire transfer or write a check and wait till the next warrant and put it on it. So this is starting to cause a little problem in the reconciliation process because money's left the town, but it hasn't been reflected in the accounting ledger or in the banks or in the treasurer's books. So we're just recommending that anytime money is leaving the town, that a warrant is drawn. Even a 1-check warrant that can be done. They're pretty easy to do, and it's just going to save time in the reconciliation process.
Especially since we do it electronically.
Yeah, and it even affected the next comment when I get to it. I'll it kind of impacts it too there. So it'll just make the reconciliation process. It is particularly annoying in the process when it crosses months, when the money left the bank in 1 month and the next warrant isn't until the next month. So
This can't be something that happens very often, I would think, right? I mean, we have a weekly warrant.
It does not happen very often. How it happens is, if you notice that the last warrant of the month, this has been ongoing in a town practice to do what they call the wire warrants or the B warrants.
Mm-hmm.
The last, so you'll have probably 4 warrants the last warrant
Right.
of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And those extra warrants are the wire warrants. So typically you have something for a Medicare Part B penalty wire warrant. You'll also have meals tax and cart tax and any debt. Those are the things that get wired out of the bank. And it's been prior practice for the town to do them once a month.
Thank you, Phil.
But with our financial management system and with electronic signatures, there's no need to wait until the end of the month. We can do a warrant on demand. So, if we needed to wire debt out and it was a payment that was forgotten about, we could wire it out and do a warrant today and, send it out to the board to sign. So that should not be an issue. It's just been a
So
long-standing
I
practice.
take it as now the board has been alerted that on occasion we might have
There could be special warrants.
a special warrant.
Yeah.
Go on.
Good. The next comment has to do with the payroll and vendor warrants. In fiscal year 2015, the town fully implemented the banking module for the Munis system. And it's a real slick system, but as with any software, it's all about the setup. So I'll get back to that part of it in a minute, but what happens is the payroll and vendor accounts are called zero balance accounts. And they're called that because the treasurer transfers into the bank, it's the exact amount that's gonna be drawn out in the warrant. So at the end of the month, whatever is in the bank should be offset in a perfect world by an outstanding checklist. Well, the bank prepares that they do something called a reconciliation report. And it basically gets from one month's outstanding checklist to the next month's outstanding checklist based on all the transactions. And whenever a check run, a warrant is done in town, it's submitted to, the check run is submitted to the bank. And deposits, obviously, too. But the reconciliation report also has things on it that don't match up. For example, if there was a deposit in the bank and there wasn't a check run submitted that exactly matched it, it would show up on that. Or if there was a check that cleared but wasn't on a check run that it got, that would show up on it too. Now, those things can happen but occasionally, but they should clear within a month. If it was just a timing thing, that you forgot, you did a warrant on the 30th, but you didn't get the check run to the bank till the 1st, that would clear up within 1 month. When we did the bank rec for payroll and vendor in June of 2015, there were a lot of those types of items that had been lingering for several months. So I think what it turned out to be is, in the setup, there were, when you're setting it up in Munis, you have revenue accounts that you have to tell what bank that money is going to be deposited every time that transaction occurs. And similarly, anytime there's expenditure accounts, that anytime an expense shows up on a warrant on that, you have to identify what bank account it's going to be coming out of. So I think what happened is, in the setup, certain things, like I think particularly the withholdings, is that what they were mostly, that were set up to come out of one bank account? And they were.
Actually, we didn't go live with Treasury Management in Munis until July 1st, 2015. So we didn't reconcile the cash in Munis last year. We reconciled the cash on the Quattro spreadsheet.
Oh, but those bank reconciliation reports, that was the problem, right?
It had to do with some, yes, wage attachments and withholdings, but.
They were funded in one bank, but were coming out of another bank.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what my point is that I think that those reconciliation reports, a lot of treasurers think that the banks are just being reconciled, but really they're just providing you with an outstanding list and things that are throwing it off from being a zero balance account. So we just think that you should a little carefully review those reconciliation reports and make sure that anything that hasn't cleared within 1 month, other than an outstanding check, is investigated and cleared.
And I'll just note that to date, the payroll and vendor accounts have been reconciled and they are zero balance,
So all those items that were on there have been cleared. The next comments are the informational ones. And we've talked about the GASB 68 in my class 2 management letters. We're giving you heads up that these were coming down the pike. So GASB 68 is the reporting the pension liability. Linda's been giving you information about the other post-employment benefits liability that's been reported for several years now, and now the pension liability is in your financial statements. So we're required to report in your financial statements the liability of $41,397,000 that is now showing up and brings down your net position by that amount. I don't believe that is going to negatively impact your bond rating, because Moody's and Standard & Poor's, when they were looking at your financial statements in 2014, they looked at your net position, and then they went to the notes to the financial statements. And in the notes to the financial statements, it didn't have your unfunded liability, but it had Middlesex County's unfunded liability. And then there was a percentage in there, your share of the contributions, your share of the assessments. So when they were doing your net position in their ratings, they took the net position in your balance sheet statement of net position, and then they made an adjustment to it for an estimated amount for the net pension liability. But now, this new standard is requiring that the Middlesex county retirement system be treated as many, many separate entities, and that each one has their own share of it, of the net pension liability, and there's an audited report that comes out for it. And so your share was, like I said, $41,397,000. There's also a new, in the financial statement, there's also a new disclosure, a schedule in the back that shows the share of the mass teachers' liability that they're paying, the state is paying on behalf of you. And because you don't have to pay any of that, it's not on your financial statements, it's on the state's financial system, financial statements. But it also, just for magnitude, is another $44 million. That's an unfunded liability related to the mass teachers. Not yours, but is being paid on behalf of you by the state. And so the next informational item has to do with the federal grants. In the past, all federal grants were, the federal government issued circulars to say how they wanted their federal grants managed. There was probably 8 or 9 circulars. They recently issued something called the Uniform Guidance, and it supersedes all of those circulars. It's a fairly lengthy document, but it's heavy. Places a heavy emphasis on internal controls and on documenting your internal controls. So what they want us as auditors to do is to come in and ask you what your internal control document is, and to start analyzing that before we start looking at your federal grants. And there's certain things that I just kind of noted that they want specifically addressed in your internal control document, including related party transactions as an entity, and related parties or conflict of interest of people who are doing the selection process. A lot of them is things that you commonly do anyhow, but they need to be specifically addressed in this document. So this is, I think, one of the ones that Liz is going to have to get a little more familiar with, as we all are, because this is the implementation year, and along with Mike over at the school, because he manages most of the grants. And I think that I'm going to another seminar on this in June, and I was going to talk to Liz about some more of the things that I think you should do about setting up an internal control document that will meet the requirements of the uniform guidance. And the next part of the report is about the status of the prior year findings. And I'm not going to go into each one of them, but there was something about credit balances for accounts receivable. That's been addressed. There was something about loans authorized and unissued, and that has been addressed. There was procurement, and we found one instance that was similar to something that was spent over $25,000 in the aggregate. And so, but they went out to bid this year for that vendor, for that product, because it was like not one item, it was a number of purchases that exceeded the $25,000 threshold. So I would call that good. Steve, this is one that I'll be glad to get this one out of here. Every time I think about it, I had said this comment to do with health insurance for retirees. I thought that this was going to pass a long time ago, and Steve said not so fast, and it never has passed. And so now you've said and I had recommended that you get something to set up so that you could bill other retirees for their health insurance. And now, if the new Modernization Act passes, then it's going to remove your ability to do just that. So if you hire somebody that had 18 years service in one town and came and worked for you for 2 years and retired, before the Modernization Act got in, when we went to pay his retirees health insurance, you could bill them for 18 out of the 20 years. If the Modernization Act goes through, you won't be able to do that, and you're on the hook for the whole amount of the retirees' health insurance.
When does that go in effect?
Well,
Or
if the Modernization Act passes, it'll be.
has to pass, okay.
Yeah, it hasn't passed yet, but, and I don't know whether parts of it will or not. I can't tell you.
I don't know how much is actually taking place with his back billing anyway.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, I have
We
some.
were all set to send out the bills.
Yeah.
They are gonna go out July 1st if this doesn't get approved before then, so, and we've paid all of our bills that we've received from other communities.
I mean, it's not a game changer, but because it was only for people after, I think, 2011, retired after 2011. But, you know, on an ongoing basis, it would just continue to grow, you know? So there's a lot of,
It would end up being a total nightmare for
yeah,
managing it, I would guess.
yeah, but, you know, somewhere along the line, you think that the retirement boards could get involved, and, because they know exactly how many years everybody's worked for everybody. The problem is, you know, to me,
It's not the same.
yeah, everything's not the same. So, in my opinion, I think that something would be nice if the retirement boards did it and they said, look, there's a flat amount. You know, you're gonna win on some, you're gonna lose on others, but there's a flat amount that you can charge for the family plan or per single, and that's it. I don't care what you're paying. It's, you know, so it would be, at least be manageable, you know, but when everybody's paying a different rate, it's just too much for the retirement. They don't want to touch it right now, the retirement boards, so.
Excuse me,
And-
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair?
Jeff?
Yes, I just want to make sure I understand. Excuse me, I may repeat what you just said,
Sure.
but currently, if someone's working 18 years at one town.
Yep.
And 2 years at a new town,
And then retires.
and then retires.
Yep.
Then that new town is responsible for those 18 years?
No, the old town is responsible for the 18, where you work. It's prorated by where you worked. So,
Okay, so the old town is responsible for the 18,
yeah,
and the 2 years,
you'd be responsible.
you'd be
Well,
responsible.
you're-
But who pays it, and then?
You pay
that's
it.
what I'm-
You pay the whole thing,
We pay the
so,
whole thing, so we bill them 18 years
Yes.
worth,
yes,
correct?
Yep.
All right, with the new plan, we wouldn't be able to do that.
correct.
All right,
You'd be responsible for the whole thing.
Okay, so that would have an issue on hiring, I would think.
Well, you know, you like to think not, but, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
It's a two-way street, though. Works both ways.
yeah.
I'm not sure about that, but, okay.
And the next one had to do with petty cash, and I think that they already did part of that with the petty cash. They took some petty cash away, and they're gonna formalize a policy in next fiscal year. I just wanted, if you have the financial statements, I just wanted to go a couple things on that. One is that, on page one, there's like 3 reports in here. One is the opinion letter, and that's where Standard Poor's and Moody's looks at, and they go directly to the opinion. And they look at the opinion, as long as that says the financial statements present fairly, then they move on, because the rest of it is boilerplate language. And so, if they see fairly present, they know they can start reading the report. There's also a report on internal controls and compliance, and that's in the very back, the last 4 pages of the report. There's internal control and compliance over all your programs, and that was a clean report. There were no findings to report on that. And then the last 2 pages are a report on the federal grants, on compliance with laws and regulations with federal grants and internal control over federal grants. And there were no findings on that. So all 3 of those reports are clean. Another schedule, I think, is a nice schedule to just to take a look at is on page 37 and 38. And these are your debt schedules. And it shows a lot of information about those. It tells you when the date was sold, the original borrowing, how much is finally left, the interest rate, and when it's going to clear off the books. So it kind of gives you an idea of when some more funding sources, principal, will become available for some of these. So I think, you know, that's something that is helpful. And on page 57 is the budget versus actual report. And this shows that that you did well again in your budget and actual, and you generated, the far right column says variance with final budget. That's where you generate your free cash. So when your revenues come in over budget and your expenditures come in under budget, that's what generates your free cash. And it's always better to be conservative in your revenues, because it's a lot easier to give out free cash than to try to generate it again once you've built those higher estimated receipts into your budget. And so you did go down on your, I think you put a little more emphasis on your estimated receipts during the budget process in fiscal year 15 than you did in 14, because you did generate more excess revenues by about 400,000 or 350,000 in fiscal year 14 than you did in 15. But this is still a healthy amount to generate. The only other thing that I really noticed in the financials was that keep an eye on your tax liens. Those seem to have gone up a little bit, and so it could be just a timing things of when the liens occurred, but they've gone from 540 in 13 to 470 in 14 to about 720 in fiscal year 15. So it's just something to keep an eye on. So, be glad to answer any questions or get into more detail if you want. If you want to see the net pension liability, that shows up on page 11.
Of this report?
Yeah. Yep.
Dick, what about our efforts to stop the bleeding here and start contributing
To the OPEB?
to the OPEB?
Well,
Where do we see that, Adam? Not even an attaboy?
no, I mean, it's you know, it is showing what your OPEB balance is on page 2015, page 20. Page 20. So right now there's like $168,000 in it, but the entire liability for OPEB
44 million.
is almost $82 million.
Which is a big jump from the previous year reported, which is a question I had when I was looking at the
Yeah,
document. And we've seen this number go all over the place.
yeah.
So what are the drivers?
Well, Linda's here, could probably answer that better than me, but it's interest rates, it's,
If you'd like to wait, we'll have that in our presentation.
All right, we can wait then, that's fine.
All right.
And
yeah,
fair.
I mean,
So
it's,
there's a number of things that we'll go over.
yeah,
Mhm.
Bring us from the last time to this time.
yeah, I'll stick around too, because
To the point, though, it's, we're gonna be committing, $250,000 this upcoming fiscal year
yeah,
to cover new employees going forward.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, again, stop the bleeding a little
Yeah.
bit here. Why bother?
well, bond rating companies like it. It is a good thing. And, you can't handle $81 million. There's nothing you can do but that. But what I think is I have three types of clients. I have little ones that have regional school systems, so they don't have the teachers, so they just have small town halls and DPWs and police. And so they don't have huge liabilities. And some of those are actually funding almost the whole thing. And then I have some cities that don't even touch it because, they're just surviving, getting by to try to not lay off people. And then I have some in the middle that are trying to do something. And I think that Moody's understands that very few people that have full-blown school systems are going to be able to fund the whole thing. But they like to see you doing something about it. Because that's one of the first things they ask in bond rating calls is, what are you doing about it? And sometimes it's plan design, and sometimes it's we're doing something to stop the bleeding, and making an effort to having some kind of a plan. I know what Linda will tell you is that when the bond rating companies look at the retirement liability, it's $41 million, but they don't worry about that because you have a legislatively required funding plan. And so eventually, I think it's probably 2036, is that when, 2034, 2036, when it's gonna be fully funded, if the stock market cooperates, because there's a funding plan in place. It's got bumped back a couple times because the market didn't cooperate, and they would have had to increase the assessments so much to still get it, because I think it was 2028 it was supposed to be done. And so they would have had to increase assessments to so much that they didn't want to have to do it, so they pushed it out. Well, since there's no funding plan, legislatively required funding plan for OPEB, it's just the more you can do for it, the better the bond rating companies like it. And I always say that the close, I mean, 250 out of 81 million, I think that the towns that do the most for it will keep the benefits the longest, because I think that there's some kind of a worry out there that although the legislature, it's right now you have to fund 50%, and I don't think the legislature will ever say that you don't have to do that, but I could see a day when they said at a local option that they wouldn't vote to do it, but they might give a local option to do less or something. But because, I mean, $81 million is, how are you going to fund that? I mean,
So I guess the question comes, I mean, that's the $250,000 that isn't free cash or available for other services. And, you know, we, as a board, kind of made a commitment to, you know, stop the bleeding.
Yep.
And limit the liability. But I've always questioned whether or not, I mean, cities and towns are gonna be around for a long time. Yes, it's gonna gobble up an annual portion of your budget in order to pay what you need to pay,
Yep.
Instead of some additional. And I don't know what significant difference it is doing for us in relation to our bond rating if we weren't doing it.
Well, it's more, I think, of just trying to take care of the liabilities that you're incurring instead of just pushing more off to the future. The less funding you do, the more you're pushing on to the future taxpayers. And so, although you can't take care of it all, I just think that doing nothing just means that the amount that comes out of your health insurance is always going to continue to grow unless you just slice down the size of your town. So, I mean, it might not be right now, and it might be 40 years from now, 50 years from now, before you really have a healthy dent into that. But you have to start someplace, I think.
Michael?
Just had a question about the MSBA, what you call the School Building Assistant Bureau Grant, I believe, right? Is that the same thing?
The mass teachers?
Nope.
Oh.
For the building,
Yep.
the new high
Okay.
school
Yep,
and the middle
MSBA,
school. And we are getting a reimbursement from the state.
Yep.
And I read in here, you have, I believe you're calling it the School Building Assistance Bureau Grant? Is that the same thing, or is that something different?
I don't know where you're addressing it.
On page 35. So I see that we capture the debt for the school at 67 million and change.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't see where we capture the reimbursement from the MSBA in the audit.
That was well, there's a couple places. If you look on page, it's on the wrong line on page. It's on page 14. But it's on the wrong line on page 14. It should be up under intergovernmental on page 14 in the capital project fund.
Okay, so
And-
I'm on 14 and,
It was 12 million. That's what you took in
okay,
the school.
earnings or investment,
Yeah,
okay,
it's on the
so
wrong line. It should be
Oh,
under
okay.
intergovernmental. That's my error.
All right.
Apologize.
Sorry, where is
that clears it up then.
Yeah,
So that's,
Yeah.
all right. That's the, okay.
yeah. And there's also, on a statement, it shows up, what is fully accrued, it would show up on page 12. in the year that it got the money to, like it was accrued. Under capital grants. And there's other things that are called capital grants. There's two sets of financials. One's, the first two statements are called the statement of net position and the statement of activities. And those are full accrual statements, and they include the fixed assets and the debt. And the next set of statements are called the fund financial statements, and they approximate the types that you do on a town basis.
So, on page 12, the number in the capital grants and contribution is the number that we're referring to?
That's in part, that is the MSBA money, and it's something else, some other grants that you got on you, that you might not have received, but
Yeah,
was
because it's
fully
under
included.
education, so
Yeah,
I wasn't
so
sure.
it's almost all, that's the money that you got on a cash basis, plus what's outstanding as an accrual basis. So that's a full accrual, so even if you haven't received the federal grant, then it kind of nets out what was the receivable at the beginning of the
Yeah.
period, the receivable at the end of the period, and what you got this year. And it brings it all into this,
Okay.
on that statement.
Okay.
And we have a number of months, we didn't get much of anything.
No, I know, but we will start to see hopefully we'll start to see more of that money coming in here as we're coming to the end.
Well, you got the whole back, so
Okay.
5%.
And when you get that MSBA money, that actually brings your net assets up, because you're building a building that's worth $150 million, and you're only paying, I forget what you ultimately got, but $100 million, because you're getting $50 million from them, so you got a building that's gone in books and only debt of $100 million. So it makes you to the good by that amount.
It works for me.
Yeah,
120 million and change.
20 million.
Shh, don't let Jerry hear that.
Yes, let's not let them know. You want to borrow off that money. Thank you.
Any other questions? Michael, you have any comments?
I think that overall, the report is favorable. I don't want to put words
Yeah,
in
no,
the
you guys
auditor's
do a
mouth,
good
but
job.
I think that, what we've all known, that a lot of attention is paid to managing the town's finances, both internally, under the finance director's oversight, as well as in terms of the leadership of the town through the financial planning team. And this report reflects that.
No, I've said in the past, and I'm saying a very solid finance team, so very
Mhm.
solid, especially starting with Liz, so you're fortunate.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the OPEB review.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
through you, we received some feedback that the public might benefit from having the ability to see the PowerPoint presentations in another forum. So we're working on a permanent solution, but for tonight's meeting, if folks are following along at home, if you go to the town website, there's a box in the center of the homepage. If you click on Project Updates, there is a link for Board of Selectmen meeting presentations, and the PowerPoint presentation that we're going through is actually at that. It's on the page that link brings you to. You just open up as a PDF, and you'll see the exact slides that are being gone through tonight. Again, we're working on a permanent solution as to how to make the information more visible during the live meetings.
Okay.
Good evening, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Linda Warnable. I am an actuary, an owner of KMS Actuaries, and we have been engaged by the town. This is our second round of valuations that we perform for the town. What we do for OPEB, we only have to really do every other year. So we prepare information for you for every year, because you've got to put everything in your financial statements every year. But we only do the kind of heavy lifting once every other year. So this is the result of the July 1, 2014 valuation. Sounds like it's old, but it really isn't, because It's used for the FY15 financials, as well as it will be used for the FY16 financials. So, it's kind of like a little education on what this thing all means, and of course, why things change from year to year. Just kind of a caveat about OPEB. OPEB is a very volatile liability for a number of reasons. It's not as stable as the retirement system liabilities, probably, that you're kind of used to. Under retirement, when liabilities are generated for the liabilities on retirement, you've got people's salaries, service, mortality. Those things are pretty predictable from a town's perspective. The OPEB liability, however, as you know, uses health insurance premiums. That is a real guess for the future. And that's really one of the big reasons why there's a bit of volatility in these numbers. But I'm going to get into some details a little bit into the presentation on why things do change every second year, why they're kind of going all over the place. Here's my agenda. We're going to just quickly talk about what's GASB 45. And by the way, GASB 45 is going away in a couple of years. Not completely, it's being replaced. When the GASB renumbers the statement, you know it's big. It's not just an amended statement. So, if you guys were good students of GASB 67 and 68 on retirement, the new OPEB standards are very similar. It's almost like the GASB took the words retirement system under 67 and 68 and replaced them with the word OPEB. They're really, really the same. So when Dick talked about putting your net pension liability on your balance sheet, in a couple of years, we're going to be putting our net OPEB liability on the balance sheet. It's going to make more people a little more, twitchy. We'll talk about an actual evaluation really fast, what we do and how we get to some of the results. We'll specifically look at your liabilities, some sensitivities, which is important. What assumption do we make that if we change that assumption just a little bit, what would happen to these liabilities? Again, they're pretty volatile. And then kind of talk about some sensitivity analysis. The difference between a cost and a liability is a very important concept to understand when you're dealing with these liabilities. And then I am very good with interrupting me, and we can answer some questions as we go, because if you tell me when I'm on slide 22, can you go back to slide 3? I might not have the right train of thought to answer. So I don't mind if anybody wants to interrupt. Okay, GASB 45 came about several years ago. It's accrual accounting. In the old days, whatever the town paid for retiree medical, that portion, up to 50% of the cost of a retiree's health insurance, life insurance, all of that, that's all you used to report, that you would report whatever you paid. Well, that's all well and good, but as these liabilities are being generated, it really is not properly recognizing in your financial statements the earning of these benefits. And that's really the accrual accounting. Very similar to pension. Every day an employee works, he's earning another benefit toward some benefit that you're promising him at retirement. So it's really like a deferred compensation plan, just like retirement system. So if you think about that, as your employees kind of go through their working lifetime, they are earning benefits under OPEB. We're looking here, the reason I call it OPEB, by the way, it's other than pensions. Pensions have been around a long time. Everything kind of happens to pensions first because they're a little more popular. So all of a sudden people said, whoa, we have these other liabilities, these medical liabilities. We also need to accrue them as they're earned. So they called it other post-employment benefits. It's everything but the pension, medical, dental insurance, life insurance. I put Medicare reimbursements. Your town does not deliver that benefit. Some towns actually reimburse all or a portion of Medicare Part B for their 65 and older retirees. By law, state law, if you force somebody on Medicare and they're beyond 65, the law changed a few years ago. The retiree who picks up Medicare at age 70 gets penalized by Medicare. The town is on the hook for that penalty. So there's a lot of kind of weird little things that is included in this other than medical. But for the town of North Reading, we just look at medical and life insurance. So GASB 45, very important issue is GASB does not require funding of these things. State requires you to fund to pay up to 50% of the retirees' health insurance, right? That's the requirement, or you cannot charge more than 50%. But there's nobody that's saying right now that you must put more money into an OPEB trust or anywhere else. So you really are contributing something. You're contributing about $1.5 million a year, I think, for retiree medical, for the 50%, up to the 50% piece, all right? So no requirement for funding, unlike retirement system, the Chapter 32 requires full funding by 2040 on your retirement system, or your unfunded liability must be funded by 2040, nothing under OPEB, okay? Sorry, I'm pointing to the wrong thing. So we're gonna, as I already mentioned, every other year we calculate an expense that's going to go into the financial statements. The expense is made up of two pieces. You've got these terrible things you hear about, the unfunded liability. That's all the past. And then the normal cost is the value of the benefit we're earning this year. All right, so you're always going to pay those. As long as you have one active employee, you will have a normal cost. You're going to pay every year in the future the value of the benefits earned. What the thing you read about, all the things you read about are these unfunded liabilities. That's all the past. It's the fact that you didn't establish a trust fund back in 1651 when you hired your first employee or whatever, and maybe offered this benefit, you weren't funding for it. So all those years that you're not funding it, all those active employees earning benefits and all those retirees being paid a benefit, you haven't funded those liabilities, therefore that creates the unfunded liability. It's the past. All right, so what you do is under accrual accounting, you're going to try to figure out a funding schedule or a method. And again, we're not really funding, we're just trying to account for it. We're trying to figure out a method to pay for that over some reasonable period of time in the future. All right. GASB 45 also requires a bunch of disclosures that Dick takes from my report, and he knows which items in this report need to be disclosed, a plan description, and what the town actually pays, and all that kind of stuff. All right. So we do an every other year evaluation. We collect actually information on every single one of your retirees covered under health insurance or life insurance. We collect information on every one of your active employees, including teachers, because even though Mass Teachers Retirement System takes care of Mass Teachers' retirements, they do not take care of the health insurance. So this evaluation includes all of your school employees, all teachers. So we've got a mix of people here. We've got general employees who work for the town who are in Middlesex. We've got public safety employees who are working for the town in Middlesex, and we have all the teachers who work for the town but are in Mass Teachers. Those are the people who are included here. Plan provisions, well, it's a medical plan. We get the premium information for the plans you offer your retirees. There's different plans for people who aren't eligible for Medicare. They're thrown in with all the active employees. Then you've got the plans once somebody does become eligible for Medicare. State law does require them to go on to a Medicare supplemental plan. The rates go way down for those. So that's good. That's a good thing from the town's perspective. They're covered under Medicare as well as a sup plan. So that's kind of the plan provision. It's like, what are you providing? What items do you pay for? We need to make some assumptions about the future. We need to figure out for each one of the health insurance plans you offer, we only know what the premium is right now. What about next year? What about the year after? What about 20 years from now when the 40-year-old is going to retire at age 60? We need to make some assumptions about that future, how that future premium is going to increase. We call that the healthcare trend rates. We need to know, once we come up with this model, we have all these future payments, how do we discount them to the present? The discount rate. Everyone talks about the discount rate. There's a lot of controversy over the discount rate. I'll talk about that on GASB 45 has a requirement for us to use. And then GASB 75, the new one, have even more prescriptive requirements on the discount rate. Demographic assumptions, very important. We look to both Middlesex retirement system and Mass teachers, and we follow their assumptions. They have certain assumptions on, you know, somebody with 5 years of service. What's the probability they're actually going to stay around? They might terminate without any benefits. They may retire after age 58 or something like that. So we're going to look to both of those actuarial reports for those assumptions, because it's the same group of people. It doesn't make sense to use different assumptions. We use all the same assumptions, including mortality, and we'll talk a little bit about mortality rates, which is one of the big drivers of an increase that we saw this time. And then some methods I talked about. You've got this big unfunded liability. We need to chop it up into some pieces, because nobody's going to be able to or want to expense $80 million. We can like break that out over a particular period of time that GASB lets us do, and those are the actuarial methods. All right, just a quick rundown. This is all in the report, broken out, and toward the back there's a few department breakouts as well that Liz wanted to see, but you know, it's like almost 500 active employees, again, includes teachers, and you know, a little over 250 retired members. Some of them cover a spouse. These are mostly retirees, so we don't, you know, it's a family plan, and whether there's a spouse or 12 children and a spouse, we pretty much just look at their spouses. We've got 45 retirees, and about half of, a little less, more than half of them cover a spouse. They're in your active plans. And then, you know, 162 retirees in a Medicare supplemental plan. There are some retirees who don't elect medical coverage and only have life insurance. Very small liability for life insurance. It's very predictable. The rates are teeny compared to health insurance, but we do value them, the $5,000 policy. And then, as I mentioned, if you are eligible for Medicare, you must move into a Medicare supplemental plan. And that's a good thing for your benefits people to stay on top of, because, you know, picture a $2,500 a month family plan versus $285 Medicare supplemental plan. You want to move those people onto the MedSup plans. All right, I've already mentioned these, the plan provisions. We look to eligibility of retirement system, because if somebody's going to retire, that's probably what's the impetus for them to retire. They've got a decent retirement benefit. If they're a Group 1 employee, that means just they're not public safety. They can retire at age 55 with 10 years of service, or 20 or more years of service. There was a break. There was some pension reform a few years ago, which created a new tier of employees. Anyone hired after April 1 of 2012 now must wait till they're 60 years old, not 55. All right, pensions though, remember, if you don't retire at 65, you don't get the full benefit. If you retire at 55, you're like at a 1.5% multiplier. 65, you're at a 2.5% multiplier. Not in the OPEB world. Health insurance is a health insurance, whether you are 64 or you're 55 or you're out on disability at 30. It's the same benefit. There's no reductions for people who don't have, you know, more than 10 years of service. So it's very different in terms of liability structure. When you're talking about retirement, the later you work, the older you are, you're going to have a bigger benefit. But in the OPEB world, it really doesn't matter how many years of service you have. You're going to have the same benefit. So liabilities for much younger people are much larger. All right. So as I already mentioned, you guys provide your health insurance, Medicare-related enrollment penalty. I don't think we had any of those people. $5,000 life insurance coverage, and retirees are going to pay 30% of the HMO, and then all the other plans, 50%. So the town picks up either 70 or 50% for all the other plans. All right, so I talked about economic assumptions. We've got this big payout projection that we need to discount back to the present. All right, GASB 45 does require us to use the rate of return of the investments used to finance those benefits. All right, so if you're not pulling them out of a big pension trust like you have, like Middlesex has, but you're paying them out of your general fund, that's really the driver as to why we're at a 4% discount rate. It's supposed to be kind of the rate of return on cash. Well, we pretty much know 4% is probably not, close to the rate of return on cash. I mean, at least the cash that I'm invested in is more like point something. But it's kind of become pretty acceptable to use a 4% discount rate for what we're calling unfunded liabilities. All right. If we had been funding this thing from the beginning and we've got a nice, trust with a substantial trust balance, 70% funded, 80% funded, we now expect a particular rate of return from this trust. Maybe it's 7.5. PRIT is saying, they're predicting that they're, I think they're like at 7.7, 7.8 return. That's what we could use if we had most of these liabilities funded, and that's how we were going to pay these benefits. But when you're paying them out of general fund, it's almost like you're not earning any investment return to pay the benefits in the future. So that's really the driver of the discount rate. I mentioned healthcare cost trend rates. Usually what we look at from this year to next year, we assume about an 8% increase in premium. The following year, maybe 7.5, maybe 7. We decline that every year down to an ultimate rate of about 5%. That's kind of like, 50 years from now, we're assuming year by year health insurance rates are going up by 5%. It tends to kind of level off to that, because studies have shown if it's much higher, it will actually take over the GDP. Medical will just take it over. It will be over 100% of our gross domestic product. So we've got to kind of keep that model reasonably stable, which means we can't have 10 to 15% increases way out into the future. We're seeing that trend rate come down a little bit over the last several years. When GASB 45 was first implemented, we were using 11 and 10% trend rates year by year. But lately, we have just not been seeing that, so we've started to bring down the annual trend rate, which is why we're now starting at 8. We go down, 8, like I said, 7.5, 7, and bring it down to a 5. So those are the things. In 2 years from now, we're going to say, did we really have an 8% increase in year 1 and a 7.5 in year 2? Maybe not. We readjust, we say, created a gain because the rates were not that high, or maybe it was an awful renewal and it was 10% premium increases for 2 years. That would create losses. We had some gains, I think, on, and we'll go over all of the different pieces of that. I already talked about this, demographic assumptions. I go to Middlesex County and Mass teachers. We need to figure out for every single active employee, when do we think they're going to retire? When do we think they could die, become disabled, or leave and never get a benefit? All right? We never hit any of these assumptions spot on. But we've got a group, and we're trying, on average, to kind of say we think people on average are going to retire at 62, or police and fire may retire at 54 on average. That's where we're going to get those assumptions. Of course, again, we're never going to hit those perfectly in 2 years from now. This is why we have to keep redoing valuations. We kind of assess where we are, and we analyze each of these assumptions to see how close or how far we actually came. Demographic assumptions do vary by employee type. Your public safety employees are assumed to retire much younger than your general employees, and teachers have a whole nother set because they have a little bit different retirement benefits as well and some different eligibilities, and Mass teachers is a different system than Middlesex, so we do look at all these different types of employees. Mortality has been the big talk of the actuarial community. We love to talk about death, apparently. One of the things that we've been seeing over many years, especially in large public systems, is that we've been underestimating people's longevity. That people really are living a lot longer than we have been anticipating. And any kind of retirement system, or I call these any annuity type of benefit, the longer you live, the more expensive they are. So our actuarial standards of practice totally revised the demographic assumption of mortality on what is a reasonable assumption to use. And we now have this thing called expected mortality improvement. And it's just a big term that says, if I'm 65 years old today, I'm expected to live, maybe to 85. But if I'm 45 years old today, I'm actually going to be expected to live longer than 85. It's like a different kind of, rate of, or life expectancy for younger people. And that's just kind of what we all assume, is that each generation behind us is going to live a little bit longer. We've never really made those complicated assumptions. We've just said, everybody dies at these rates, at these ages, regardless of whether they're already in their 60s or they're in their 20s. So that, again, we're assuming younger folks are living longer. When we assume people live longer, it increases liabilities, and that is one of the, you and everybody are kind of moving on to this new mortality improvement. And again, your retirement system, Middlesex County, already took the hit for this, which is where we got the new mortality assumption from them. So they've already taken the hit for longer living, people living longer, which means assessments probably went up, and then everybody who's in Middlesex, kind of gets the brunt of that. We have something called a participation rate. We don't assume that every single active employee retires at whatever age and takes the benefit. So we only assume 70% of your active employees will actually elect coverage. The rest of them, they have a spouse that has something somewhere else that they prefer. And that's kind of a tricky assumption to kind of nail down. We usually kind of look at how generous your benefits are. When you're at the 50% rate, not everyone's going to take it. Maybe somebody's married to somebody who lives in a town nearby that they actually only charge their retirees 25%. So there's some of that we look at, that if it's a very generous plan, that participation rate would be a little bit higher. And then, once somebody does retire and they've elected to take coverage, are they only going to elect it for themselves, or are they going to elect to have their spouse covered? That's another body that creates a liability. So that's a pretty important assumption, that number of spouses.
If you elect to go through your husband or wife's plan when you retire, can you go back to, if that scenario changes, can you go back to the plan that you didn't take?
So are you saying once you're retired and I do elect to cover a spouse, but I decide a couple of years down the road I'd only want to elect coverage for just me?
No. If I'm under this plan, but say my wife has a better plan.
She's still working? Maybe she's
Yeah.
still working in
I go
benefits?
to her plan. Can I come back?
Liz, generally, some places would say, when you retire, if you do not elect, that's sort of your one chance.
Right.
Do you allow people
We
to?
do not have a policy going either way.
So somebody could come
I
back?
don't think many places have policy. I only know one town that has a policy that says that you have to be on health insurance when you retire to stay on it. So if you weren't on the health insurance,
As an active
as an
employee.
active employee.
So you can come back. I mean, you can't come back to the plan. Is that?
Yes.
I'm kind of thinking most people would allow it, because there's this group of people who, it's kind of a big unknown throughout the entire Commonwealth. If you hear about people who leave employed, they've got 10 years, but they're not yet age eligible to retire under the retirement system. They want to leave their money in the retirement plan because it holds their eligibility spot for health insurance. So then once they become eligible for retirement, they go to Middlesex County, they fill out their paperwork, then they come here and say, I'm retired now, I want to get on health insurance. So that's kind of a big unknown group of people, because we don't really even know who. I mean, Middlesex probably knows, the teachers probably know, but again, we're not quite sure who would actually come back to take the health insurance. We don't even know where they're working. They could be working in another retirement system.
Right.
Right, so as you can imagine, there's a lot of unknowns. You try to collect the best information you can, but it's never going to be 100% accurate.
Thank you.
All right, so here's the discussion, and this is spelled out in a little more detail because I rounded, some of the numbers didn't round from our report. They rounded out to 0, so I didn't list them. But on page 5 of our report, we go through a pretty detailed, we call it a gain-loss analysis. We go from the prior evaluation report, July 1 of 2012, we're now doing July 1 of 2014. What happened in those 2 years? And this is kind of what transpires, all right? We look at everybody, kind of like every new person that we've collected, all the information, and we run them through again under everything we did last time. And this was the deviation of experience from the prior evaluation. It was a small loss. Again, we're never going to hit our assumptions perfectly. It was about a $2.6 million loss. So if everything else stayed the same, we would be, instead of 76.3, which is what we expected to be at, we would be 2.6 million higher. So by the way, to get from 2 years ago to this year, you know, we all know what happens to our mortgage if we decided not to pay it, right? It doesn't stay the same. It's gonna get whacked with interest for that period of time that you are not paying. I mean, what happens with your mortgage balance is you get an interest assessment on it, and then they subtract your payment. And you keep doing that, and you're hoping that it goes down, and it ends up at 0 someday, right? Well, if you don't make any payments of either interest or principal, you're just going up and up and up. And remember what else is happening. Remember I talked about the thing called the normal cost? The normal cost is the value of the benefits earned in the year. We've got 2 more years of those in here too. We do have some benefit payments that you did pay out that got subtracted, but all of that, those normal costs added in, interest, and subtracting benefit payments brings us from the $67 million to $76 million, doing nothing. Doing nothing but looking at a forecast from 4 years ago, July 1 of 2012, brings us to $76 million liability. It's like, again, doing nothing, just having that liability sit on paper is going to grow from 67 million to 76. We had a few things we needed to do. Morbidity tables, morbidity is a little bit different than mortality. Mortality is living and dying. It's mortality rates when you die. Morbidity tables is sickness, illness. We actually updated the morbidity tables, and now we look at them unisex, male versus female. It's really the rate of usage of health insurance. All right, and so studies show that for every year you age, health insurance costs increase 3%. So you got a 20-year-old over here, and you have a 64-year-old over here. There's a huge difference in the health insurance rate. That's what a morbidity table is, and so we upgraded our morbidity tables. And again, breaking it out into male and female, we actually had a little gain, an $8 million gain by updating that table and looking at a newer study on morbidity rates.
Linda, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
When she's saying we upgraded, it's not her firm. These are, these are the standards that they have to go by. So it's everybody that's doing actuarial.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. We have something called the Actuarial Standards Practice, ASOPs. We are a self-regulating profession. So we have these ASOPs, and there's an ASOP for pretty much everything we do. There's one for just economic assumptions, one for demographic assumptions. There's one for value in group health benefits, which is this, and that would be where that morbidity table standard that we follow. We follow sort of a little guideline on how we do these things. All right. So what I talked about, this mortality improvement, that was probably really your biggest change in liability. It was an $11 million liability increase by changing those mortality tables, following what Siegel did. Siegel Company is who is the actuary for Middlesex County. They updated the mortality tables, this past year, so we updated the mortality tables, so that's the $11 million gain. So adding up all of those changes from July 1 of 2012, where we were at 67 million, we're now at 81, almost 82 million. So that's what brings you to, from one valuation period and 2 years later to the next. I kind of am thinking, like, when we do this on July 1 of 16, the actuarial profession is kind of like tired right now. We've been implementing GASB 45, GASB 67, 68. We're about to implement 75. We made a lot of changes to the ASOPs. I'm not seeing any more things down the road, that are imminent. So I kind of think, like, when we do the July 1/16 valuation, hopefully our biggest fluctuating item is going to be the premiums. That's the only, I want to say, unknown at this point. We're not going to have a change to the pre- and post-retirement mortality. We're not going to have a change to morbidity tables. We're really only going to have an experience kind of thing and premium changes, because, we don't really know what the next round of premiums are going to be. Those change every year. We're guessing. So hopefully they will be a little more stable than they have been over the past couple of years. All right. This one, I think Dick kind of alluded to this. The picture shows 1,000 words. There's not much on this graph. What this is I was saying that you guys pay out like about $1.5 million a year for retiree medical, and with our model, with Health Trend is in there. There's one retiree, by the way, and this was his line. That would go up 8%, 7%, but there's also a chance he may not be living. So it's not exactly 8, it might be a little bit more flat line. When he turns 65, if he's under 65, it drops, and then it goes up again, because it's still, health insurance is increasing, and then when he dies, it would drop to 0. Well, this is not just one person. That's that one person in that model. There's people already 65, so there's no drops for them. There's people very young who might become disabled, small probability of that. They're in there. There's people who are, this does not include anyone who's not hired yet. All right, so these are all your current retirees, but then every single active employee I'm expecting will retire someday or terminate. They won't be on this chart. So this is kind of like, the 30-year projection of what we're kind of seeing for health insurance. And this is, this is pay as you go. This is, if you ever looked at your Middlesex County valuation report, they've probably got a payout projection that I kind of would surmise that you are not paying Middlesex County when I say you. They're not appropriating more than the pension benefits. All right. This will, if we don't start funding somewhere soon, we're just going to keep paying this pay-as-you-go, and that's kind of what the theory of pre-funding is, that you're putting some monies aside, you've got some good investments, it builds, you've got a investment policy that's going to say, oh, we're in this mix of equities and fixed income securities, hopefully earning 6, 7, or 8% forecasted down the road, so you can use some of that investment return to pay some of these benefits. Because this is the pay-as-you-go model. This is like if you just keep paying out general fund. So this is really what is the basis of the model. It's this, and then we take it and chop it down into different pieces and try to figure out, is there a better line for you? And the line could be, a pre-funding. Nobody really had, I have one client that has a pre-funding contribution policy in place. The policy might be, I guess I should say that's actuarially determined. The policy might be, we're paying $500,000 this year and our budget goes up 3%, so that's what our OPEB funding will go up by. Or we are paying $150,000 a year, period. Or we're paying barely anything, and when our retirement system is fully funded, we'll take that $15 million of the unfunded liability portion of the retirement system contribution and put it in OPEB. So see, there's all kinds of different things that you can do that, as Dick said, put something aside, but there are just not a lot of people who are talking about an actual, like the way on Middlesex, if you look at that valuation report, there is a formula on how you calculate the appropriation, and Middlesex board comes up with it, they approve it, and that's what you pay. There really isn't a whole lot of that going on in the OPEB world, which is the challenge, because it's kind of discretionary. So talking about pay-as-you-go, that line, that's it. You know, we talk about potential ramification on bond rating. You know, the entire country pretty much has OPEB for public employees. The bonding, you know, the bond rating agencies, I think it is that, are you doing something? And, you know, when something is better than nothing, it's hard, they're not gonna come right out and say it, so that's why we kinda like say it's a potential, you know, it could be. And as I said, many of my clients finance on a pay-as-you-go. The opposite end of the spectrum is funding this ARC, the normal cost plus an amortization of that unfunded. We amortize it over 30 years, that's the maximum allowable by GASB. You need a trust for that, and you guys have a trust. Knowing the trust must be irrevocable, we'll talk a little bit about that. But now you've got this model, you've got a contribution policy, which probably has an investment policy, allows the use of a higher discount rate. So if you look at our report, we have a forecast at a 7.5% discount rate compared to the 4. You know, you'd be happy to see that, sorry, I need my glasses to see my numbers here. We had $82 million liability under the 4% discount rate, but that liability changes to $41 million when we use a 7.5% discount rate. That's a huge, you know, it's half. So that's also a benefit of pre-funding when you start building up some meaningful assets, all right? Partially pre-fund is pretty much what most are doing. And I'll talk about, this has more ramification, I guess, on GASB 75 results than 45. You could partially fund, and I could come up with a blended discount rate. There was never any prescriptive way to do it in GASB 45, so we all came up with some kind of creative ways to blend that. But when you've got an $81 million liability, and you know, if you're funding a few $1 million, that's meaningful. If it's small, then it doesn't move that dial very much on the discount rate. But that is a benefit, by the way, of putting some money aside, is that we can move the discount rate. So you've established an irrevocable OPEB trust. I underlined irrevocable, and we all know what that means. So the plan assets are segregated and restricted. The purpose of those assets are to pay benefits for retirees and beneficiaries for health insurance and other OPEB, legally protected from creditors, and that the contributions to the trust must be irrevocable. Dick would not recognize those assets in a separate fiduciary fund if all of these conditions were not met. They are met, which means we can recognize them, which means we can reflect them. So any assets you have will be reflected in our valuation, and the assets offset the liabilities, thus forming a little bit lower unfunded. So I just said census data, obviously who is in this plan is going to impact these liabilities. How many retirees do you have? How old are people? Closer they are to retirement, higher the liabilities will be. If you've got a young workforce, that would mean lower liabilities. And when will people retire? Those are all questions that we've got to take a guess at. And so our liabilities kind of can, you know, be a little flexible on that. Plan provisions, if you know you require your retirees to pay 50% of most of the plans, some don't. So that's in our model. Your benefits are provided for life. So, and you know, the problem with OPEB in the Commonwealth is there's not a whole lot of flexibility. You've got a plan, you cannot force your retirees to pay more than 50%. You don't have a lot of flexibility on the plan provisions. So, you know, it might be which plans that you're going to offer. You know, so that just means you're just shifting some of the cost of health insurance to your retirees. They'll have to, if you offer less rich, poorer plans, I hate to call it less rich plans, you're just shifting some of the cost of coverage to them. And retiree cost sharing provisions are your 50% rates. Valuations assumptions, as I mentioned, there's there's a lot of them, and we try to do the best, and that's why we redo valuations to come back to reality and say, ooh, we kind of were off on that. There's other things in your liabilities that you're not technically ever gonna pay for, something called the implicit subsidy. That is just the value of the benefit for a retiree. As I mentioned, costs for retirees are a lot higher than an active employee. But guess what? They all pay the same rates when they're in the active plan. Retiree who's 64 will pay the exact same premium as a 20-year-old. We actually bump up the value of that premium, and that's the implicit subsidy. Because remember, OPEB is for retirees. We don't really care about the active employees in this particular model. We care about the cost of health insurance for retirees. These are some of the trends. These are all in the report, but just to give you an idea, healthcare cost trend rate. Our rates, I told you, started at 8 and they trend down to 5. If we lowered each of those trend rates by 1 percentage point, instead of the 8, we would start with 7, and instead of trending down to 5, we'd go to 4. Our liabilities would drop by 24%. All right, it's big dollars that we're talking about. These are very sensitive because we're going way, way out into the future. Same going +1, right? We're going up almost 35% in liabilities just by changing that trend rate by 1 percentage point either way. And then the ARC, that's the number that you're putting on your financial statements. You know, again, these numbers are large when you start kind of looking at how sensitive they are to some of these assumptions. The healthcare cost trend rate and discount rate, by the way, are the two most important and most impactful assumptions. The others, if somebody's going to retire at 62 versus 63, it's probably not a big deal, but these are the big deal assumptions. Discount rate assumption, again, we use 4, but if we went to 5, raising the discount rate lowers liabilities. We're dropping our liabilities by almost 20%. Conversely, if we lower that discount rate to 3%, we're up 28% on the liabilities.
Can I just jump in one?
Sure.
That's something, that sensitivity analysis, that's in the, it's the same thing for the pension liability that we disclose in the financial statement. So we got from Middlesex, so that's not just Linda saying that, you know what, if I'm wrong by 1%, either way on my discount assumption, it's going to either be a 65 or 105. It's the same thing on the retirement schedule. I have a schedule on page 49 here that says, with the existing discount rate that they're using for Middlesex, it's 41.3. But if they're wrong one, and it should be 8.875, it's only 34 million. And if they're wrong the other way, it's 50 million. So the liability, just by that one number for these two things, could be either 34, 41, or 50 for the retirement, or 65, 81, or 105. It's just if that one number changes the next time they do it, it's going to jump that high.
And on retirement, it's not going to be as volatile because it's only the liabilities that are changing because of these assumptions. You're still subtracting however many assets Middlesex allocated to the town of North Reading. Maybe it's $50 million, so they start with an $80 million liability. Here, there really are no assets to subtract off. So it's all liability shifting either way.
How much more to this presentation?
I think 2 pages. So those, the next 2 screens are really just to describe cost versus liability. All right, cost is what you're paying out. Every year you're paying out retirement benefits for your retirees. These you can control somewhat in terms of the plans you offer and the cost sharing arrangements that you offer. I mentioned pension reform. We're pushing off retirements for newer employees. That will save money because they're collecting that benefit for fewer years. When you're older, as I mentioned, you have your public safety employees retiring at 55 versus a general employee at 65. That liability for the public safety employee is much higher. All right. The liabilities, though, it's the assumptions that are driving liabilities. It's the cost, it's the program itself. Those are all driving the liability. As I mentioned, just to wrap up, GASB 43, 45 undergone significant overhaul. 74, 75 will be effective FY18. What is showing on your financial statements for pensions right now with unfunded liabilities, the 40 million. Coincidentally, 40 million retirement from Middlesex and 40 from Mass Teachers is 80. We've got an $80 million liability here. that will also move on to the balance sheet with this new statement, 7475. And that is it.
Any questions?
Abby would like one, I have one.
Abby?
Do you have any communities that you're aware of that are actually funding the
I'm not sure if Wellesley is, that was,
that was an
they were a very early funder of OPEB
Right.
because they were 100% funded in their retirement systems for many years. After 2008, I'm not sure what happened there. There are very few communities that fund the ARC.
So I would be curious, I know that there are a few communities that have talked about the possibility of dealing with OPEB by funding the ARC. And clearly, if you're going to save about half of your liability, it's not necessarily a bad idea. But I'm wondering if anybody's ever really looked at, for example, the cost of borrowing, because you'd obviously have to bond it if you could, versus the amount you'd save, versus if you took the money that you were no longer going to have as a liability and figured out, over the long run, would it really pan
Yeah,
out?
I'm not sure, are there any communities you know that have OPEB bonds?
No, there were several that did it with their pension liability. They actually went out and bonded for their pension liability a long time ago. I'm not sure how that actually worked out in the long run. I think that some of them weren't happy that they did it. The thing is that if you did it for your OPEB, right now, there's no requirement to fund it.
Right,
So, but there would be a requirement to pay off your bond.
right.
So it'd be like really tight to try to, I mean, it's been thought of because that's what people did with the pension a long time ago,
I've
yeah.
talked to a couple of communities who have been tossing it around over the last several years and not acting.
Yeah,
And GASB 75 is going to change the way the discount rate is calculated. If you fully funded the ARC, you got that advantage of raising that discount rate right off the bat to 7.5 or whatever your investment consultants were, forecasting for your rate of return. Under 75, it's actually the level of assets that are sitting in the trust at the day you do the valuation. As soon as you run out, are predicted to run out of assets, you're back to the 20-year municipal bond rate, which is 3.19 as of last week. So the 4% kind of distressing rate that we're looking at now is going to drop even lower under GASB 75, because GASB 75 is forcing us to use the 20-year, I guess, high-quality AA maybe, municipal bond rates, which are in the low 3s.
Michael?
Just two quick things. Do you foresee the eligibility age going up?
Under OPEB? Right now, it's only up for the retiree, or the employees hired after April 1, 2012. That OPEB commission tried to put forward some changes, you could get a much better benefit if you had your 30 years of service, and it would be way reduced. That kind of went defunct, the
that's what I was
commission.
talking about, is the
I haven't heard that it's reconvened, and so, I
And
know
the
there was
last
some
thing I have
pressure.
is really an internal question, is I would like to see these OPEB numbers broken out between schools and town government. I really think it's an important thing for us to start tracking,
We have,
because when we start taking our fixed costs off the bottom line, it's getting harder and harder to have enough money left over to run general government and schools. So we need to look at that, because, they have that whole Chapter 70 formula, and which is great, and I know they're fighting to try to get that formula fixed, but this is increasing costs. When you have a majority of schools, we should just know what it looks like. I would like to see how it breaks out between town government and schools. I just think it's an important thing that we evaluate as we go through it.
on page 28 of our report, we have town, school, police, fire, water, golf, parks and recreation.
28.
On page 28, second to the last page and the last page of the 2-year breakout. People, liabilities, ARCs.
about a quarter of the way down on the right is the
Yep.
$81 million. So it says actuarial accrued liability as of July first reading, unfortunately.
This is helpful.
Any other questions from board members? Finance Committee? Town Finance Director? Town Administrator?
Just in
Oh,
relation
Mr.
to-
O'Leary.
yeah, just in relation to more employees, well, at some point, those that are not Medicare eligible are going to retreat out. I mean, was 1984 back? employees?
Yeah, that's a,
Again, I don't know.
Do you have any non-med people who never had their covered quarters?
If we do, it's a very small number.
Yeah.
I know that there was one employee that just retired that was not Medicare eligible. They retired in January. There could be a few on the school side, but it's a handful.
So we're moving everybody into the Medicare plan?
Yeah, I mean, eventually it's going to retreat, people.
Yeah, they'll all, if there were, usually what we do, we'll look at the data, and if there's anyone over 60, significantly over 65, still on the active plans, one or two, we kind of let go. But if there's a significant number, we would bring it to Liz's attention, so there probably wasn't that we saw. Because in that case, either you're not pushing over your people properly, or they're miscoded, or they really are a lot of employees, and there just aren't that many anymore who aren't covered. Is it 86? Was it 1986, I think, that,
84, 86, somewhere,
Yeah.
right.
so that's, 30 years.
It was 87.
I always have to count them.
Yeah. And then,
So that's a good thing in liability
Mhm.
terms that we're assuming everybody, if they're under 65, we're assuming everybody is gonna fall into a Medicare supplemental plan.
Okay, if there's no further questions, thank you for the presentation,
Thank you.
the
It's very
information.
detailed.
Very, very helpful.
I have just one quick question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Have you calculated for us, what our, if we were to move forward again, as you said, stop the bleeding, as far as calculating out what we need to do every year going forward? Because at some point, people will be dropping off. We'll be paying, pay as you go, and then we would be
Yeah,
fighting.
so that graph that I had, that assumes that no one's living forever. So if there's a 99-year-old, like right now, chances are the,
No, you're missing the
No,
question.
No, what I'm saying is,
We-
as we take on new employees,
okay,
you're factoring in this particular employee or this group of employees is gonna be here for 23 years, or 25 years, or 28 or
how
40
much does
years.
that guy
The normal
cost, you're
cost.
saying?
What's
The
that?
normal
So
cost.
Liz, we provided we called it the new entrant grid. Did we do
So
last year
That
they
was
did.
last year.
last time?
Yes.
So we can update for this time. So we have something called a new entrant grid,
Right.
because it's different for each type of employee.
Right,
of
so
public
if we
safety
were to
is
get
more
that, and again, our target was to get to a point where we're funding that regularly, and again, as people age and drop off,
They'd be
you can
replaced by
catch up,
someone.
yeah, but you can catch up sooner. You're certainly gonna catch up sooner, your outstanding liability is gonna drop. But I don't know,
But the liability never technically, the liability, remember, is your benefits.
I understand,
Right,
but I mean,
so
as
your
far as your
unfunded-
ability to fund it,
Yeah, your unfunded liability is
Unfunded
what's-
liability shrinks.
Right,
Right.
by pre-funding.
Wouldn't that be the normal cost that you would have in here?
Yeah, so this normal cost, though, you've got, somebody who's older, their
Okay.
normal cost is a little bit different than a brand-new person.
Okay.
Remember,
Right.
brand-new people technically only have a normal cost, they have no past, so
Right.
they aren't contributing to that unfunded liability.
Yeah. So our goal was to take every brand-new employee, regardless of the age, right, and with your help, determine what we needed to put in annually such that that employee at retirement is funded from our OPEB fund,
Mhm.
right? And so what I think I heard you say tonight is that you really look at this every 2 years.
So we can give you a new
Right.
normal
So what
cost.
we need is that every 2 years, and then we will make an adjustment to the amount of money, we'll try to make an adjustment to the amount of money that we're going to put into the OPEB fund.
Yep.
With the idea that, it may be 30, 40 years from now, right, that the current people that are retired will be no longer with us, some of them. And the new employees, as they get to retire, will be paid from the
We
fund.
would have been funding
Right.
them.
And that's the
Post
only,
2 years
from
ago.
my perspective, it's the only way I can see us, making any progress toward this. Because we just can't start putting money to deal with those that are already in the retirement system. We'll just have to continue to pay as you go. And obviously, there's the risk associated with it is, as you said, we don't know what our insurance rates are gonna be on an annual basis. And therefore, that number could be a very, very large number as we go forward.
Well, I have one other town that's doing just what you said, they're doing something, but every time there's a new employee, or even for them, it's a change, they have a change employee, they have the department come to them, not with just what the annual salary is, but what the annual salary plus what the current year's amount for the OPEB, and that's what they start funding that employee at on an annual basis. So I
Right.
think that's a really good idea about stopping the bleeding right there. Because that's what you can go to Moody's with and say, you know what, we can't do anything about the 81 million, but we're taking care of it now.
All right, I think we need to move on. We have an overloaded agenda, and we're already almost an hour behind schedule, so. But thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Liz, do we need this? Water rates. I should ask, is there, is there anyone here for public comment? Can you make it quick so that we can get back on schedule?
That's Ms. Taylor.
What?
That's Valerie Taylor.
Yes.
Magnolia.
Yeah. Mark, just hold off for a minute so that. Go ahead.
I am here to, for the ongoing issue for Magnolia Road, and I'm asking the board to consider a reduction in the original proposal of the rate of purchasing the vacant lot where my septic system, my field septic system currently is. So if possible, I'll be as quick as possible, but if I could just pass these out, it's just to give an image of what I'm speaking to. I don't need a brief on we're all up to date on what's gone on, I'm assuming, on Magnolia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, originally there was three, from my conversations with the town administrator, there was three proposed options. Initially, back last year, we discussed the possibility of a land swap, because the original amount proposed was close to $10,000. So that was kind of the idea that made sense to me at the time. As this has evolved and learning more of what those costs actually look like, it's essentially up to $10,000 anyway when you're done with surveying both lots, having those lots carved out and doing purchase and sales on them. So what originally seemed to be like a possible remedy, doesn't appear to be one that I want to pursue at this time. Another option proposed was the town issuing removal of the septic system. Obviously, I'm not in favor of that proposal, as I have 3 toddlers and a family household, and I don't think that forcing me out of my home is in my best interest. The second option was the town was considering conveying the lot for the amount that was paid out, which was $9,950.62, and plus any council, survey, title, and other fees associated. Regarding option 2, what I'm here tonight for is to propose that another amount be considered. That amount that I'm proposing is $6,000, and then just by ways of rationale of where I came up with that number. I've considered the following tax revenue. It's in the town's interest that if I acquire that lot, they're gonna have they're gonna be able to tax it, so there's some form of revenue coming in. The second rationale is that the town has had, it's been represented to me that they originally had taken the property over by eminent domain, and with certain plans for that. My understanding is those plans are no longer in effect, and leaving that vacant lot with no intention of utilizing it and/or drawing income. The third issue is public health. It's in the town's interest to remedy this current public health issue, as I have a field septic system that's leaching into town property, as well as into my water well, causing health issues. Number 4, the value that was proposed was $9,950.62. Because the land value, this land value could be much lower, because now it's been leached on for years. So that amount is what was paid for, but I mean, I'm not confident saying that that's the current value. That value could be much lower now due to the health concerns or due to the fact that it's essentially contaminated. Number 5 is a shared responsibility. The town has, in my opinion, the town has some level of culpability as they retain the surveying company which failed to do their due diligence when establishing the taking. And, there was conversations back last year that there was no evidence of the septic system being installed. Upon further discovery, I learned by pulling the documents here and speaking with Martin Fair as well as Jim DeColo that the house on my house had pulled a permit back in 1987, which allowed for a second floor addition. That was inspected and signed off. So I find it hard to believe that at no point at that time did the Board of Health or the building department come out and inspect that, because it was signed off. It's my understanding that the code would suggest that at some point they needed to have eyes on that septic system. So the argument that the town never knew there was a septic system there, doesn't seem to survive. So because, these 6 items outlined, I'm proposing that land be conveyed back, or purchased by me for $6,000. And I just included 2 pictures just for the sake of visualization. You can see where the lines are. I'm not looking to build a house. I'm not looking to build a garage. I'm just looking to a place to have an up-to-date coded septic system. As you can see, the town line runs straight through the driveway, leaving that 4-car driveway to where actually that car is parked. All that other paved area is actually town land. So underneath that is my septic system. I know that I've been in here a lot, and I think to put a visualization to it, I think it's helpful to see what I'm actually looking for and what I'm actually asking for. So tonight, it's been a year and a half. As mentioned, I have a field system. I have 3 toddler boys. I have my husband. I mean, it's not sanitary. That I have a contract with the septic company who's ready to break ground. We have septic plans that are approved, and basically we're just waiting to be able to house that septic system. And as of right now, that's the only place we can put it. So that's what I'm proposing to the board today. Hopefully, I walk out of here with the vote or whatever it is necessary to expedite this.
I'll ask the town administrator to set up a meeting at our next executive session, and you'll get an invitation where we can discuss or negotiate. That's it.
I think it's important to, town administrator has had correspondence with the Taylors as to what the options were. I think it's important that, those be put on the table, so it's not as though public feels as though, we haven't had some discussion. So maybe Mr. Gilberto could just outline what's already been proposed, as opposed to what's being offered.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Sure, I'm happy to. So Ms. Taylor and I have spoken many times over the past year and a half. And right now, as the matter stands, and as I think she's alluded to, there were three options that were proposed in a letter to her dated June 9th. The first of which was subdividing the town-owned land that's located at 11 Magnolia Street and swapping it for an equivalent amount of land to be subdivided off of the Taylor's property at number 13 Magnolia Street, and requiring that the Taylors pay any associated council, survey, title, and other fees that would be associated with the transaction. The second option, which I think was the option that I originally anticipated was going to transpire, which would be that the town convey the entirety of the property at 11 Magnolia Street for the amount that it was acquired for by the town in 2005. And again, as the board knows, the property was acquired as a part of the Eisenhower Pond Park takings. There were 2 lots on either side of number 13 Magnolia that were acquired, number 11 and number 15 Magnolia, for a total of $15,500, including back taxes that were owed at that time. We did a quick calculation based on the size of each parcel and identified that of that $15,500 acquisition amount paid by the town in 2005, approximately $9,950.62 would have been attributable to 11 Magnolia Road. And that option was to pay that amount to the town, which again was the amount paid in 2005, not escalated for the passage of time, and that any associated fees be paid as well, which we believe were just going to be recording fees and any town council fees, because there wouldn't be any need for surveying to take place at this point, at least not from the town standpoint. And then the third option, if it would assist in a process that the town would issue in order to remove the septic system from the town-owned land, that may or may not assist with discussions with the title company or otherwise. So those were the 3 options that were identified that kind of been circulating in the discussion, going back to the warrant article discussion in October of 2015, if I remember correctly, when the board saw it and received authorization from town meeting to file special legislation to take this land, number 11 Magnolia, out of Article 97, parkland protection.
Bob, Jeff has a question.
What?
Jeff has his hand up.
Yes, Jeff?
Yeah, do we have, looking at her document here, do we have any record of the town authorizing the building permit? Do we have that?
I believe, so there were, building permit was authorized in 2014, if I remember
So
correctly.
1987.
If there is such a record, I've not seen it.
So we've not seen it yet, so we're
but-
gonna need that.
But I think that there's a presumption that, if I'm hearing it
That
correctly.
record was produced in one of our initial meetings, that was produced by Jim Nicola.
Yeah, I'm confident that it
Yeah.
exists, I just have not seen it myself. But I still think what's unclear is the tie back to the construction of the septic system. It sounds like you're inferring that it would have had to have been compliant at that time, but from what I understand from the health
That's
director,
important, yeah.
from what I understand from the health director, we don't have a plan of a system being constructed for compliance.
Oh, okay, I see what you're
It's a
saying.
And then there was some
building permit
conversation
is
that,
different.
Right, right.
Septic
No, I understand. I
issue.
understand.
there was conversation that there was no evidence that it was constructed. However, we did verify, Martin Fair as well as the local septic company did confirm when they they dug around there, that it is a system that is from around, late 70s, early 80s. Which
certainly-
would substantiate my argument that it's been there, and it wasn't just, no one went down there in the middle of the night and dug it up and installed a septic system.
Well, I think, just to clarify, I think that the question was, did the septic system get built on the land after the town acquired it?
In 2005.
In 2005, and it appears the evidence is that it did not. Again, we don't have a plan for the construction of it, but we believe that the construction predates the 2005 taking.
We can save this for our meeting.
So as I've suggested, I think I'm requesting the town administrator to contact her and set up a executive session meeting for purposes of,
We can discuss when we discuss the meeting schedule
okay.
later on.
So later in our agenda, we're gonna be setting up a couple of additional meeting dates and reviewing our summer meeting schedule. So, Mr. Gilberto will get back to you.
Okay, can I walk out of here with an idea? I mean, this, with all due respect, this has been like a year and a half with the contaminated water supply. Are we looking at like a 3-month time period? Am I gonna be back before the summer? Obviously, I can appreciate, everyone's schedule, but I'd like to just have an idea of when I'll be back for that executive session.
I defer to the
2
board
months,
more than
3
anything.
months?
Mr. Prisco.
Mr. Taylor, I think it's an unfair question at this point because we've given you some options and you didn't like them.
Yep.
Okay, so the prolonging of it, it's an equal back and forth, but mostly it's you. You don't want to take the option. I've been very supportive of what you're trying to do here. I understand it completely. But you came in here tonight and you gave us a $3,000 less option. You want us to reduce our option 2 by $3,000, and we just can't do that like that, okay?
Yep.
And I'm in disagreement. I'm in agreement with Mrs. Minipelli that this discussion should be an open session. I don't see why we're having it in executive session. I'm not sure it even qualifies for executive session. Unless someone else can tell me why, I just don't think, I think we're making a mistake. And this is one of the reasons why. We need to have an open session.
I refer
discussion.
to the town administrator on that.
But-
I mean, we certainly can confer with council, but there is a provision in the open meeting law that allows for the board to discuss strategy with regard to a real estate transaction in executive session.
So I'll finish by saying, I think you need to go home and you should think option 2 over. That makes this process go a lot faster. And we'll have to go back and consider your offer. But I don't know how we can give you a definitive answer on when this can all be done.
Is that a session that I'm privy to? I mean, is that something I'm gonna be
But we
invited
can't do it
to?
without you. We need you to have whatever the session, whether it's executive session or open session, we need to have you in the room. And I'm saying, my personal opinion, and I think there's one other member on this board that's in agreement, that this should be an open session to the town so everybody in town can hear this discussion.
Okay.
Catherine,
Just
before we close this out.
No, I know, and I know we have we need to get to other business, but just the implication that there may be litigation against the town relating to permits that were issued in 1987, that there somehow, the town was responsible or liable for that. I mean, there's an exemption in the law for litigation or claims relating to permits being issued in the first place, but the building permit is not the same thing as, and it can't be tied into or suggested that because of the building permit, the town somehow allowed this to happen. And it also predates the taking anyway. So my huge concern is the discussion in this, what's been submitted and how there's a public health crisis resulting from this, or a public health issue regarding this matter, that maybe we should be moving forward to ordering it to be removed now, and then worrying about this business of a land swap or a land purchase down the line, if we need to address that. I think maybe we need to hear from the Board of Health Director on that issue as well. And I agree with Selectman Prisco that I would actually encourage you as well to consider option 2. We've tried to meet you with every request that you've made, and we have discussed this, and we've come back and agreed to meet you with each request, and each time it's come back as, no, that isn't sufficient. So I think that, of the options that were laid out, that hopefully you would consider coming through on one of those options, which was laid out based upon your request.
And if I had the ability to do that, I absolutely would. I absolutely would. If I could strike a check right now and get this done, I would. It's not an option right now. And through all, and I know you guys have to wrap up, but for the months and years that I've come in here now, a year and a half, at no time did the town ever position that they've had any responsibility at all. I'm not saying that it was solely the town's responsibility or they did anything wrong, but I think that it's a partnership, and I think that I didn't do this. I did my due diligence when I bought the house. I didn't know the septic system wasn't on my property.
Yeah.
But for the town to just wipe their hands and say that they have no part in this, I have to respectfully disagree.
All right, so I'm ending this at this point.
Okay.
You were here for public comment. It's not an agenda item. We've given you the more than courtesy by allowing a discussion, and town administrator will get in touch with you. And whether or not it'll be an open session or executive session, Mr. Gilberto will check with town council.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch, Doctor.
Water, sorry, Mara.
Payment in an installment or something like that. That's
Good evening, Mark Clark, Water Superintendent. I want to recognize that we do have two members of the Water Commission here as well. We have Vinnie Ragucci, who's the chair of the Water Commission, and Andrew Street, who's also a member. We met earlier this evening, and they will be making a recommendation relative to this. This is a annual water rate and capital plan hearing. There should be some information in your package, and I'm not going to go through it in great depth because I know you all are interested in kind of getting to the bottom line here, but I just want to go through quickly. First thing I want to say is we had taken some $530,000 out of the various funds, the sticky fund and the infrastructure stabilization fund a few years ago, and the water rates were set with a requirement that we repay back that $530,000 to those funds. I am kind of happy to say that we are at that point now where that money has been paid back. So I'm not going to go into that in any detail. The water budget that was passed at town meeting last week represents a 3.0% increase over the water budget for FY16. So that's kind of the starting point going into that. There's a breakdown in the memo I gave you as to where that money's coming from and where it's going to. There were some reductions in some costs. Personnel went down, expenses went up slightly. But overall, the budget has gone up 3%. In terms of where are we in FY16, we're in fairly good position. Water rates were established last year with the thought of generating, as we have thought in approximately the past 5 fiscal years, to generate approximately $100,000 in retained earnings. Looking at it now, we're in the final month of the fiscal year. Looks like we're going to do that $100,000 plus a little bit more. Actual projections on retained earnings are in the neighborhood of $207,000 for FY16. If you think back to last summer, it started out as a very high water demand summer. We went to a water restriction fairly quickly, which solved our peak day demands, but we did continue to experience fairly high demands throughout the whole summer. The result of that is our billing in FY17 is about 15% higher than it was in FY16. So if you just consider the rates went up 8% from FY15 to 16, that should have, on a flat line, generated 8% more in revenue. We billed for 15% more. So again, we try to be conservative in our estimates. We try to not look at, not project that we're going to have a very dry year and sell a lot of water, but this past year was relatively dry. So we are tending to generate a little bit more water than we predicted going into the fiscal year. Just to kind of get down to the bottom line, with the 3% increase in the budget and the fact that we're going to the MWRA, which was also voted last week at town meeting, Water Department is recommending a 6% increase. We showed in past years the need to go and raise money in order to have our rates sufficiently capture revenue in order to make that transition to the MWRA. So I'm not going to go into detail. I'm going to just basically make that recommendation. I turn to the Water Commission if they have a comment, and then I'd certainly be available for any questions you guys might have.
Members of the Water Commission, any comment? If so, you can get to a microphone somewhere.
Mr. Chairman, we just want to say that we concur with the staff recommendation of a 6% increase based on the documentation that Mark has provided. We also had some discussion that we'd make future recommendations that within the next year we take a look going forward, because we are joining the MWRA, to look at potentially a new water rate study that would look at other tiered options moving forward. That way that the tier 1, the folks that probably get hit the hardest and maybe use the water the least, are somewhat benefited by taking a different look at how this will impact them in the future.
Have you looked at the projected, basically, bond rates? Not the percentage bond rate, but the actual payment schedules based on the work that finance did, and looking at financing the capital cost of water, and looking at more of trying to balance the water rate over the next 5 years as we move into this transition?
Well, I would say we're certainly been working with the finance department and with the town administrator and with our consultant to look at this. And that's where the recommendation, why aren't we going forward? We're generating more than $100,000 in retained earning in the current fiscal year. We're only having a 3% increase in the budget. Why are we asking for more than that in terms of our rate increase going into next year? Part of that is because we're looking at a longer term need to get to where we need to be with the rates, with the capital projects that have come on, the buy-in costs we talked about with the MWA, plus operating and maintaining our existing system. So where we're gonna need to be 5 years from now, so that we're not all of a sudden faced with a real sharp spike in the water rates in 2020.
So I guess my question is the Water Commission aware of the plan, basically? Have they looked at that?
Yes, we've seen all the data that's come forward from the Finance Committee.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The replacement of the water meters, I believe that should have some benefit towards managing the cost as well, once we have to execute that, based on the information that's provided us up till now. Do you have a better schedule when that's gonna happen?
Yeah, we're actually doing it in kind of a two-phase thing. So we're looking to go out to bid for the actual purchase of the meter. So we're gonna spec a meter and a radio unit, if you will, or a remote unit. Purchase those separately and then bid the installation separate from that. We're hoping to do develop the package to bid out the equipment, or the first part of that this summer, and then in the fall go out with the installation contract and begin installing sometime later this year. So once those go in, we should start seeing the benefit. It won't be obviously until they're fully implemented that we'll see the full benefit.
And I do like your idea about the tiering and looking at those users that are probably the least amount of users and demand on the water supply. I would like to see that study.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Yule?
Would not the seller of the meters also provide a installation?
They're really done, the projects are done two different ways. You can get, you can do one combined where you have the meter supplier be the meter installer as well. Our consultant has recommended against that. They found that it seems to work better to have the two separate, where you just have a supply contract and then have an installation contract. They're really two unrelated things. A meter installer, to them, a meter is a meter is a meter. We want to be able to pick the meter ourselves that we're looking to, and not put it out and give more discretion to the installer than to the town in terms of the end product we wind up accepting.
There's no warranty issue having a third vendor install them?
No, in terms of the unit itself will be warranted by the supplier. The meter manufacturer would warranty their unit.
Jeff, you weren't on the capital committee when that decision was made to fund that, but I think it was discussed at the board that the potential savings with new meters, because as they get older, they're
No, I
less
understand
efficient, was substantial to pay for the cost of, the savings would fund the cost of the new meters.
Oh, no, I
So it's not-
understand that, but my question is more to warranty issues. Many manufacturers, when they create an item, they say, well, you have to have an approved person installing our product. because if they do it wrong, we're not gonna warranty it. So I guess that's where I'm going at with this.
And part of the bid process for procuring the installation contractor will be a certain level of experience installing meters. We're not just gonna throw that out and the first guy that comes in off the street can, okay, you're the low bidder, you're gonna put our meters. And there's gonna be a level of experience that you've done this for a number of years and you're familiar with the system. They're gonna have to be fully qualified to put in that meter.
Qualified by the manufacturer that you're
They're
buying
gonna have
from.
to, whatever requirements the manufacturer has in terms of training, they have to meet.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Leary.
Just looking at your synopsis and presentation here that you provided us before the meeting. I mean, it's prior estimates and as far as what the increases would be over the next 4 or 5 fiscal years, potentially, averaging maybe 9% a year. Are you anticipating with this recommendation of utilizing the surplus that's being generated to help stabilize the rates going forward until we get a better idea of the costs of construction? Or basically, why aren't you recommending an 8 or a 9?
And that's a very fair question. We really want to look at it, we've looked at it long-term, and I think we made that statement last year, and if you looked at it, there were some 3% years and there were some 10% years, and it averaged out close to 8%. We really want to take a look at it. While we're taking a long-term view, we absolutely want to take a look at the numbers on an annual basis as well. So one of the things we did when we said we were going to pay back the Stickney Fund, for lack of a better term, in 5 years, we set the rates and we wound up paying that back in 3 years. And people were like, well, maybe we're a little too aggressive with raising the water rates. We don't want to be at a point where we're saying, well, we think we're going to generate $100,000 in retained earnings. Let's go up 8%, and then all of a sudden we're generating $300,000 in retained earnings. We're trying to, I guess it would be, do the best we can making an estimate and maintain some level of credibility in terms of going forward and meeting where we need to be.
Mr. O'Leary.
Good. No, I just, we're looking at the presentation from
Mhm.
last year, and again, it would project increases, average increases, more than what's being proposed.
Yeah, I think we were, what, in the 7.5
Yeah.
annually?
And that's over
I mean,
10 years.
some of it, obviously, the retained earning part of it is a big function of how
Well,
much
again,
water
I
is sold,
too-
which is, any
But-
year can be up
Right,
or
but like the
down.
Water Commission's proposal and Mark's presentation here, you want to avoid a significant spike in hikes in the rates. And again, well, 6-8% isn't necessarily gradual, but by the same token, when all of a sudden you're going up 12 or 15%,
Mhm.
you don't want to see that either. So, again, I appreciate the effort and the thoughtfulness, putting it forth, and just maybe trying to be a little conservative, and I just hope we're in good shape. Again, people can anticipate, 6 to 8% over the next 4 or 5 years, annually. I'm going to put it out there and say so. Whether we join the MWRA or not, we're still looking at those types of increases as a result of the contract with Andover and the capital improvement needs to our current water system. So I just don't want to shortchange the water department.
You've taken into account the 5% increase from Andover, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Finance Committee?
This is actually the first time that we've heard of the rates. We have a liaison, yeah, we're not part of the, our liaison is not informed of the meeting.
I look forward to the information.
I don't see any reason why the finance committee wouldn't go along with this. The only questions that we would have would not be a part of the water rates discussion, but more a part for the down the line, and I'll talk to Mark about it later on, as to what the capital committee approved and thought they were buying for meters as opposed to what the water department may or may not buy. That has nothing to do with the rates.
Okay.
Can I speak to that really quickly?
Sure.
I guess there was, part of the delay in the meter system is, there's a couple competing systems out there, and there was, I think, a little confusion, and I'll take the responsibility for it, in terms of what the thought of the capital committee was. And there's the what they call a fixed system, where you basically have antennas that are fixed. You can poll your meters as frequently as you like. You can read them every day, you can read them every 10 minutes if you'd like, versus a mobile drive-by system. And I believe the recommendation, my current full understanding of this is that we're looking for the fixed system, a fixed-based system.
And I believe that is what the capital committee had approved. And I think it's very similar to the one that Joe Clay and Mr. Lynch and Chelsea.
Yes. So that's the current plan to move forward with that project.
Cool.
Okay. So the recommendation of,
Can I just make one more comment?
sure.
It was a little confusing last year coming out of this. We typically set the rates so that we say they're effective for FY17. The actual starting date of the bills will be the last time in FY16 that your bills were read. So if you were read April 15th, our recommendation is that all bills after July 1st, 2016, so your next bill dating back to whenever your bill was read, will be at these new rates. I know some people were confused about that last year. It's how we've set the rates since I've been here. But I just want to be very clear going forward that we're not reading the meters on July 1st and back billing to the prior and front billing, to the next time we read your meter. It's basically effective any bill issued after July 1st are at these, all the way back to whenever it was prior read, are at these new rates.
So if your meter happened to have been read on June 1st, right, you will be billed on July 1st, or whenever what is the current billing month
So
now?
the next quarterly bills that go out will be dated on or about August 15th, but the meter reading for that will start about July 1st. There will be some people that were read in early April that will be billed till, say, July 3rd, if they're read on July 3rd. But they will be billed at whatever the rates set tonight are.
However, when you have the new water meters, everybody will functionally be billed on the same day, or read on the same day, is that not correct?
The possibility exists to do that, yes. Whether we wind up doing that or not, I'm not sure. We're either gonna be heavy loading one fiscal year or shorting a fiscal year, depending on how we make that transition, if you will,
Bob,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Gilberto.
Yes.
Just
Sorry,
one
Mike.
comment. So the board and I received numerous comments from the community, from residents who were impacted by the billing issue last year. But if I recall from our conversations, that situation was exacerbated by the estimated billing that we were required to do in February of 2015. We won't have that situation this year because you guys have been able to keep current on the billing, if I understand the operation correctly. Is that correct?
With the exception of a small number of broken meters,
Mhm.
we bill based on actual readings,
And
every
the-
account we have.
Great. And then just a second note for the record, Mr. Chairman, you and I, in discussions with Mr. Briscoe and with Mr. O'Leary throughout the process of planning for water, we've been well aware of the costs that are associated with the task at hand regarding our water department, but I just would note for the board that I concur with Mr. Clark's recommendation to set the rate at a 6% increase for fiscal year 2017.
Ms. Steele?
Yeah, two things. First, I want to go back to the billing versus the reading of the meter. So if the meters are read in May, but they're billed in July, you're going to get paid. You're going to be paying for the prior quarter, in essence. So July 1's bill is really for the prior quarter, correct?
Correct.
And it'll be at the new rate,
Correct. So
because people understand that,
So
right?
we start reading the town July 1st. It takes us approximately 6 weeks right now, walking and plugging every house to read the town. So the bill we issue in August 15th, for some people, their quarter will be, say, April 1st to July
Right.
1st.
Okay.
Some will be May 15th till August 15th.
Whatever, okay. So people understand that it's the billing date that is the key, not the meter reading date, as far as the new rate is concerned. Am I-
Correct. We
Okay.
just want to be
All right,
very clear.
and I want the
going
people to
forward that
understand it,
that's how
I
the
think
rates are
people would
being set.
understand it that way. The other thing, you just brought up something about the reading of the meters, the new meters, when we have them in there. I recall that the intent of making this, I think it was a $1.1 million cost to the town, is that right?
1.7.
1.7, thank you. That the savings that we were gonna get with putting these meters in part was with the fact that we can have them all read at the same time. But you're indicating that that's not correct now?
No, we will have the ability to read them all at the same time. The question is gonna come, and it's not my decision, it's how are we gonna make that transition to bill? So if we wanna bill July, based on readings on July 1st and October 1st and February, we will have the ability to do that. It's just if you're currently read May 15th, and now we're gonna read you July 1st, you're gonna get either one extra bill or an extra long period that first quarter we make that transition. It's something we need to figure out.
Right.
We can still make it, we can make it everyone read May 15th, but
Okay, I see what you're saying now, okay, I got that.
the intent, my understanding of the intent is we'll still issue quarterly water bills. We'll have the ability to issue them more frequently if there's a decision to go that way. We don't have a great need, in my estimation, to do that, to go to more than quarterly water bills.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank
this
you.
is gonna be a transition, obviously, but the key is you need to communicate with the public so they know. So if there is gonna end up being an extra water bill in there, overall for the annual bill, they're not gonna get charged anymore, but they may we just need to explain it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
All right, that's where we always get ourselves in trouble, so please, whatever it is, communicate 10 times extra.
The issue when things get out of sync is the fact that we have the staggered rate,
Yeah,
the tiered rate, and as a result.
just have to communicate it, because, the community's been very supportive, and I'm
Absolutely.
very
I wanna
appreciative
thank-
of them.
I also want to thank the board, Mr. O'Leary, your comments. Are you sure you're doing enough? Usually people are trying to chop rate increases, and it's good to have this level of support here. Obviously, with a meter change-out program, communication is key, because people are gonna need to know. We're gonna have to tell them what we're gonna do, we're gonna have to tell them when we're gonna be at your house, we're gonna have to tell them who's gonna show up at your house, what's gonna take place, and then they're gonna have to know what's gonna happen. Well, we took a reading off your old meter, and then you're gonna have a reading from your new meter, so there's gonna be a prior use. Well, what's this prior use? So the more we can communicate that, the better it's gonna work out for us as well.
What are the wishes of the board? Do we have a motion?
Well, just as an aside, I want to thank you for your presentation and explanations the other night at town meeting. You did an excellent
Mhm.
job.
Thank you.
Yes. That's ditto from the chair. Mr. Minipelli?
Do you need to close the public hearing? Was this a public hearing?
Yeah,
Yes.
Did you open?
No.
No.
I think it was
So
pretty
moved.
clear, though.
So moved.
Okay, close the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion for the recommendation of the Water Department and the Water.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve a 6% increase in water use rates and to retain charges and fees at their current rates.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appointments to the capital improvement
Mr.
planning
Chairman.
committee?
Mr. Chairman?
What?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a note for the board. We received notification that an appointment or reappointment to the Finance Committee occurred between the publication of the packet and this evening's meeting. That
Mhm.
reappointment was Ms. Robert, who is here this evening, so we've adjusted the motion to reflect not only the appointment that was already scheduled, but her reappointment as well. And I believe Ms. Minipelli has the adjusted motion.
Okay, in other words, we don't have it in our packet.
It's not in the original scan
Okay.
packet, but it was added
It was
today.
added.
Okay. Mrs. Minipelli?
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint the following individuals to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Julie Kepke, School Representative, term to expire May 31st, 2018. Michael Connolly, School Representative, term to expire June 30th, 2019. Abigail Hurlbut, Finance Committee Representative, term to expire June 30th, 2019.
Second.
A second by Mr. O'Leary. Any discussion?
Mr. Yule.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Yule.
No, he seconded it.
I
Okay.
seconded it, that's all. I have nothing to discuss.
No, I know. He was clarifying who seconded it.
Oh.
On the motion then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous?
Okay. 3% transfers.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve a 3% budget transfer from Water Enterprise Personal Services to Water Enterprise Expenses in the amount of $20,000 for fiscal year 2016.
Second.
You have a second?
Second.
Mr. Yule? Mr. Gilberto, you have a,
Mr. Chairman, this is a transfer pursuant to the state law that allows a year-end transfer to occur with the concurrence of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, so long as it falls within the required limitations under the state law. This transfer was approved by the Finance Committee last Monday evening at their meeting immediately prior to the town meeting. And again, going from memory, I know Mr. Clark is here this evening, but this is a request to transfer from available funds in the salary appropriation for the water budget this year to the expense appropriation to account for purchase of water from the town of Andover.
okay. And that's because overall water consumption for the past year is up.
Correct.
And productivity of our wells didn't keep up with the additional water.
Yep.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
Mr. Chairman, through you, just a note with regard to the minutes. So we have the minutes from the May 23rd session here. The minutes from other meetings are in various state of review and production, and the board can expect to see them back for approval at a meeting very soon. But in terms of...
I think that's clearly, understood and appreciated. So we have the minutes of May 23rd, 2016, regular session. Mrs. Menafelli?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the May 23rd, 2016 regular session minutes as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. Any discussion?
It was just one of them, and I don't know which one it was. Had me down as Larry instead of O'Leary. Other than that, we're good.
You all said, Steve?
We'll check and correct that.
Yeah, just check and correct that. That's all.
I feel you.
Yeah, may as well assume responsibility for what I said and how I voted. Let me double check and see which motion that was. Maybe I want to pass it out.
Second thought, I don't know the guy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm
Unanimous?
going to abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay. One abstention. Mr. Prisco? Jane, did you get that? There's one abstention. Michael Prisco.
I didn't vote, just because I wasn't at the meeting, so.
Okay, and then we have executive session for the same date.
Are we, is that part of?
The motion? No.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the May 23rd, 2016 executive session minutes as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous?
And I'm
No,
gonna
again, abstention, one abstention, Mr. Prisco. Sorry.
Thank
Bill. We have legal bills for April.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve legal bills for April 2016 in the amount of $5,297.37 as follows. Copeland and Page PC General, $2,741.37. Copeland and Page PC Labor, $2,088. Copeland and Page PC Water, $468, for a total of $5,297.37.
Second.
On the motion, seconded by Mr. Yule?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? We're going to discuss the summer meeting schedule one more time, and I think we want to plan on having a executive session workshop, primarily for the purposes of contract negotiations. And the suggestion was made earlier during executive session that we might try to do that on the 20th. And we would do that at 6:30 p.m. And Michael Gilberto, at this point, that's all that would be on our agenda, correct?
Be strategy discussion relative to collective bargaining, and dependent upon the board's discretion, does the board want to schedule the discussion of the property on Magnolia Road for that same evening, either in open or executive session? Seems like it may be the appropriate time.
I think, I'd like to get this thing off the table one way or another. And I think the individual that was here today was concerned in terms of timing. I'm sure she wants to get her problem resolved. If the board is willing to accommodate that, and we would have her come in first then.
Yeah.
And try to keep it as short as possible so we could spend some time without being here until midnight on collective bargaining issues. That work for everybody? Okay, that's fine.
Can we make sure we have the health inspector too, Board of Health?
So I can check with him.
Director.
I'm sure if he's, assuming he's around, he'll be able to join us.
I guess I would suggest that I can understand the need for the health inspector, but in terms of what's there now, but it's been, she's alluded to the fact that there's information that we might not have seen or are aware of. I don't know whether, what that means, but we ought to have all the
Back to
facts together.
1987, Whatever we have for records from 1987, when the addition was put on, if there's, I mean, if there had to be a Title V in order to make it comply with the number of bedrooms, I think it's going up.
Right.
Bedrooms.
I mean,
Title V.
Not back then.
87?
I thought Title V only came into play in like 95, because I know that was the first year.
Title V, it's been around for a long time.
Maybe it was an update.
Let me see. No, it was 87, because that's when I had to put mine in.
It's not a Title V, it's a building permit.
No, I know,
Yeah,
I understand.
It's not the same thing.
Right, right.
I can understand what town records back when, when I went to take a building permit out for the shed, and the only drawing in town hall was supplied by the builder. My house was sitting on top of the septic system based on the picture or the drawing. Now, the house is nowhere near where the house was shown. So, I gather the records of back, and the house was built in '66. Early records were not necessarily very accurate. So, I mean, that's a handicap too in terms of, I think today when filings are made, things are much more accurate in terms of, or they may be an initial filing and then an as-built filed, and there's no such thing on my home.
Lenders are careful to, lenders are careful to
Yeah,
look at all of that information
which probably makes part
before
of the
they
problem.
lend
have over
money
there.
on a purchase.
Yeah. Okay, so we're settled on that date.
Yeah, I may have a conflict on that date, but I don't think, is that the only topic we're going to talk about that night?
No, collective bargaining,
Collective bargaining.
where we
Okay.
left off
Okay.
earlier
then
this
I'll-
evening.
Right, I guess then I'll have to be here. Okay.
I mean, but
Well, let's set it tentative and, well, let's schedule a meeting and
Yeah.
are you
I'll do what I
flexible
have to
enough
do.
or
Yeah,
not?
I'll do what I have to do.
Okay. Then I think last time we talked about this, you said, do we really need a meeting in July? Am I correct, or is it
no, the 4th of July,
4th of July?
like that week.
That way, well, okay.
I was just saying, I said,
So I
let's
have
go.
nothing on my calendar at all, so,
I was suggesting we only do one meeting in July.
okay. So, what works for Monday nights in July? Focusing on having one meeting.
Just consider it.
And then I would suggest, Mr. Gilberto is on vacation from the 11th, well, he's actually away from the 9th through the 17th, based on information he provided me today. So if we have a meeting on the 11th, he will not be present.
Yeah, we can't do it to him on the
That would be a
18th.
break, huh?
I would note that,
Let's do that.
Mr. Chairman, I would just note that
What?
the police chief who will be covering
Yes,
as the interim town
that's
administrator,
right.
he is willing to cover that meeting if the board were to desire to have a meeting that night.
Okay, I'll take that into consideration.
Well, maybe it'd be easier if
Yeah.
we look at the August meetings, and then we can backfill into the July, only
Okay.
because there's 5 weeks in August, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're gonna do a meeting later in August, then maybe we can catch that last Monday of July. That would give you, the town administrator, a week to get home, get caught up on things, and then we do it on the 25th. And then we have our next meeting in August would be August 8th, rather than do the 1st and 3rd. So do the 8th and the 22nd, then we're sort of back on a 2-week period. 25th, 8th, 22nd.
Michael is in town on the 8th, based on what he provided me. Think, I'm away the week of the 15th,
Of August?
yeah.
We're meeting
Right.
on the 9th, Tuesday the 9th, we have a financial planning, so.
Right.
Right, so that's why I was proposing July 25th, August 8th, which wouldn't impact your travel schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and August 22nd.
Does that work for everybody?
I'm not around on August 8th.
Okay.
But the other one's
I haven't been told where I'm gonna be.
fine. That's my other caveat, yeah.
That was a good suggestion to talk about August 1st.
Then you get back into the
Yeah.
July one. Because then maybe we go to the August 1st, which is fine, but then that means we probably should meet the 18th, which just makes it a little more challenging for the town administrator to get caught up that day, to be prepared for a meeting that evening. But he's been, you're Superman.
No, for August? No.
No, July.
Oh,
July. So if we cannot do August 8th, then let's move the meeting to August 1st, and then we'll have our July meeting on August 18th, which only gives the town administrator the 8 hours in that day to prepare, because he's gonna be gone for a whole week. That's the only challenge with that. Or maybe we do it the 19th and give him an extra day, which is a Tuesday.
from my standpoint, the Monday evening is not necessarily an issue. It does make it a little more challenging for preparing the meeting packet in the days before, but, Mr. Chairman, I'm sure Karen and Jane can work with you to.
Yeah,
Make sure things
I'll
are
work
ready.
with Karen and the
Yeah.
chief. All right, so we'll schedule the July meeting for the 18th.
Why are we
Um,
Did you
Because
s-
you can't do the 8th, so do it on the 25th and then have another one the following week on the 1st. It's 1 week apart. We're trying to get some separation between the meetings. That's the only reason why.
And what, are you talking August now, or are you talking
I
July?
thought, yeah, that's what I was confused about. All right, so we're in July now. So they're
All right, so we
gonna
just scheduled one for
do,
July 18th.
July 18th, and can you make 6:30? Okay,
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah.
okay, so
So we're
6:30 on the 18th.
Then the next one we're doing is
August 1st and 15th.
And then, Michael, you had...
Well, I thought Michael just said something about the last week of July.
yeah, that's what I
No.
thought.
No,
I didn't.
he was talking about August.
I initially did, but because Kate cannot make it on the 8th,
Yeah.
which would be 2 weeks after if we had it on the 25th of July, so now I'm suggesting we go to August 1st. That's why we booked the 18th of July. So it gives us a 2-week
And it
separation
seemed like everybody was available.
on the 1st of August.
No,
Yeah, but,
today we're available.
right. That's what it is.
And, yeah, if we can't, somebody can't make it, and... we'll-
So, does anybody have a conflict with the 1st of August?
Who knows?
That's good.
Put it down.
And just a reminder, August 2nd is National Night Out.
6:30, that's, it's okay.
I heard about National Night Out, which is August 2nd. Keep that in mind because.
We're looking for volunteers, right?
Volunteers, right. Well, we're not looking for them, they're looking for them.
Right. Okay, so August 1st, and then,
22nd.
And we're assuming these are all 6:30, right?
yes. 22nd? It's 3 weeks in between. But then at least, then the 12th and the,
Labor Day's early this year.
No, we could do the,
Labor Day's the 5th.
well, the issue is, as soon as we get to Labor Day, and next thing you know, we're on October town meeting, so.
So,
So you do the 22nd, do the 1st and the 22nd, as opposed to the 15th, right?
Yeah, I think that,
yeah.
that works.
works.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Through you, just for the board's information, the town meeting is a bit later because of a couple of holidays on the Mondays.
right.
Early
Okay.
in
That's
October,
a good
so,
thing.
That's a good thing, is right.
as Karen has noted, the board would need to sign the warrant on Monday, September 19th.
Well, that's perfect. No, is it?
So September 19th, we have to sign the warrant?
That's correct.
Okay.
And when is town meeting?
October 19th.
October 19th, wow.
So we could
That's a
skip,
that's a Thursday.
yeah. So what we could do for September is, Labor Day's the 5th, we could have a meeting on the 6th or the 8th, and then on the 19th.
You're talking
September.
September.
A Tuesday or Thursday that
Town meeting
week.
on the 17th.
So
Yeah, I
the,
was gonna say.
the week of the 5th, because the Labor Day's on the 5th, you're
Right.
saying suggest Tuesday or Wednesday?
Tuesday, Wednesday, or
We can do
Thursday.
I
And
can't
then
do
we
Thursday, but I am free Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. That week.
So you're
Us-
talking about when, September?
It would be September 6th is a Tuesday, 7th is a Wednesday, Michael can't do the 8th.
I'm gone from the 8th till the 11th.
What, this is, you're thinking about having a meeting some,
Oh,
anytime
so we
during the
gotta
week?
sign on the 19th, so
To
you
get
won't-
2 meetings in for September, and we'll need them.
The 12th and the 26th don't work?
Well, the 19th, we have to sign the warrant.
Right, that's correct.
Correct.
September 9th.
So we gotta meet on the ninth.
Meeting on the 19th?
Yes.
September to sign the warrant.
So we'll meet on the 19th, and then I was suggesting to meet one day on the week of the 5th.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's honestly, that's way too far out. I don't know what we might, if school's back in.
School goes
Or
back
if we
in.
are gonna be
Yeah.
gone that
So-
week.
Well,
When's school start, right after Labor Day?
Mhm.
That Wednesday?
Didn't, yeah.
Yeah.
well, we can
We
meet
were
on the
away
19th,
that
the
week.
19th and the
Everybody but your
26th, or the
children
12th and the
started.
19th?
Yeah, you should tell me what.
Well, right now, I've
But-
got the 19th in there.
Right,
I mean, our options are to meet on the week of the 5th sometime, or meet on the 12th. We have 2 meetings in a row.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's probably
because,
better
we've
that
got,
way.
we're blessed with having the,
I'm fine with
town
that.
meeting on the 17th,
That works.
so we'll give it extra time.
So then
Meeting on the 12th?
Yeah.
Everybody?
It's
That
in.
works. All right, I'm not going to attempt to go any further.
So, September, oh, the 12th and the 19th, you decided, okay. 12 and 19, okay.
Yeah,
We're
of
good.
September.
Okay,
I was thinking 19,
And when town
26,
meeting
that's
is
fine.
when?
that's a plan.
October
Well,
17th.
Put October 17th in
It's
for
town meeting.
town meeting.
Yep, we did that.
So that's perfect,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
because we can meet on the 3rd and 17th. Good,
Do you want to?
unless we want to have an executive session for the fun of it.
Town meeting is October,
17th.
So are we putting a meeting in for?
oh, it's that
October?
late. That's right.
Are we
So,
putting-
Mr. Chairman, just for my edification, July 18th, August 1st, August 22nd, September 12th, September 19th.
Yes,
Thank you.
but, so, maybe we need the 19th because that
Yep.
seems early now that the meeting is on the 17th.
It's generally 4 weeks, 3 weeks. It's enough
Yeah.
time for us to, we give it to the printer on the Friday. It gets printed over the next 7 days and then mailed the following Friday, I think it is,
Mhm.
and arrives 2 weeks.
4 weeks.
Right.
But that's really signed by the 19th, correct? Do we get signed on the 19th?
It doesn't need to be signed on the 19th. I think that based on the way things tend to fall, it's unlikely it would be ready for signature earlier
Right.
than the 19th. And I just remember, I think everybody kind of felt that it became very, very rushed in the fall of
Mm.
last year. And we want to try to avoid that situation for everyone's edification.
Well, what's interesting
I'm ready to
is,
move on.
why isn't town meeting on the 3rd? Tell me again.
There is a religious holiday
Religious
on
holiday.
the first Monday. Columbus Day is the second Monday,
Yeah.
and the third Monday has been scheduled for.
Yeah.
Is when it's been scheduled for.
So we wouldn't normally meet on any one of those
Just
days,
informed I got pasta on the stove, so.
from a board meeting point of view.
So you may have a board meeting on the first Monday.
Oh, yeah.
What?
You may have a board meeting the first Monday, which is the
Right.
3rd, October 3rd.
Now, let's leave that open for
She
now.
made lasagna last time. It was kind
Is that my stuff or yours?
All right,
I would never touch it.
we'll,
Show cause.
I'll just ask anybody that, as time goes on, has a conflict, let us know, and we'll put it back on the agenda to discuss further.
Okay.
Okay, we have a vote to schedule show cause hearing. Mr. Gilberto.
Mr. Chairman, in the board's packet is correspondence from the police chief relative to enforcement actions that they took regarding sale of alcohol to underage individuals. There were 3 establishments that they identified sold alcoholic beverages to an individual under the age of 21. The chief has forwarded the reports relative to those 3 establishments with a recommendation for hearings to be scheduled. Depending upon the will of the board, it looks like the next regular board meeting would be Monday, July 18th. So that's a potential date that I would encourage the board to look at for purposes of scheduling and proceed from there. And I can name the establishments if you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure.
So for the record, Ryer's Store, Christopher's Market, and Ginger Gourmet were the 3 establishments that were identified as having sold an alcoholic beverage to a minor.
So, you're recommending July?
The next regular meeting, which will be July 18th.
That's adequate time to notify them,
Yeah. More than
adequate time to, I'm assuming we have their histories.
We'll probably need to look more closely at each of the histories as we did for the last hearing, just to make
Mhm.
sure we have everything. I think we have a pretty good spreadsheet that Ms. Brooks has developed with Ms. Marlin over the past year, but we'll double check it and make sure. At least one of the establishments may have a prior instance on the record.
Okay. Does that work, Mr. Yule?
Yeah, not about the meeting, but about the process here. And, you know, in the past, we've been pretty strong, and rightly so, with regard to issues like this. But I think we've also discussed that, you know, we need to possibly sit down and identify a consistent policy on situations where we have businesses come before us for violating or selling liquor to minors. And the best time to do something like that is that when you don't have an issue like this in front of you, so it doesn't appear that we are making a change because maybe one of the establishments benefit or don't benefit by it. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think we should do that, if not after this. We can't now because we only have an executive session coming up on the 20th, and so it would have to be after that. But I think we should put that on our agenda somewhere along the line where we can decide what we're gonna, what
Well,
our
it
policy's
seems
going to
like,
be.
I mean, you know, we've had, not too long ago, and we went back to kind of past practice. I think Mr. O'Leary may have suggested that we do something a little different back then.
That's what I'm
But I
saying,
think
yeah.
now we're more or less, you know, we haven't gone for a couple of years without any. You know, we're less than a year, I think, and we've got 3 more, which is kind of startling in my,
Yeah.
you know, based on the fact
Yeah.
that there is notification that goes out. I
Went out
think
in
we have to
February.
stick with our past practice. The open item is that there's reasonably sure one of them, this is not their first violation, so
Okay, but I mean, we
we
have
have to go
no
back
written.
and look at what we've done in the past for that.
But, excuse me, Mr. Chair, we have no written policy on this, and I think it would, not only for this board, but for future boards, it would be a good idea. to
No,
have.
I understood exactly what you said, Jeff, and I think that's a good idea.
So
what
then
you
I
was-
guess I don't understand what you're saying then.
What I'm
Instead of
saying
going
is
past
that
practice.
with respect to these 3,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
I think we based on the fact that we just did 3,
Right.
that we need to kind of stick to our past practice, which I believe is something we've been doing for a while, even back before the last 3. So if we're going to change the policy, I would prefer to do it when there's nothing coming before us, as you suggested.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yes.
Stu?
I'm not sure what your past practice is, but I would prefer to, when this came up before, I would prefer to do it on a case-by-case, considering their disciplinary record in the past and the nature or the seriousness of it. You had 3 of the same violation, but in one of these establishments, there could have possibly been, there wasn't, but there could have possibly been a serious personal injury or something resulting from the violation that would have been maybe have changed things, or the way something was done internally by the licensee that may change your opinion on measure of punishment, if that's what the board decides to do. So I don't know what your past practice is with regard to these type of violations, but I do recall that coming up before and us taking them on a case by case, rather than having to, just go with a policy and strictly, have the policy set the determination for us.
Well, I'm not suggesting that right now that we have the dialogue. I understand what you're saying. It's a very good point. Have the dialogue right now, because it would be better if we did sit down and had this discussion as we're having it now, but in maybe more detail, because as you say, there's one incidence here where one it's a repeat offender. So you could still have a policy in place for a repeat offender, and for a first time, we've done it for the first time in 30 years, this is the first time they've done it, so you can have a tiered process. But I think it's worth the discussion, at least, and the attempt to show that, that we do also want to take out the subjectivity of the decision-making because of someone's, and I'm looking at in the future, someone's personal perspective or personal bias or personal favoritism. You want to get those things out of the way, and they can be taken out of the way with careful thought, and they're designed so that, they did this, we know we got to do that. They did this. I mean, law is that way, that, so it usually works well that way. So that's what I'm thinking.
You don't want discretion?
I'm in favor of that, yeah.
To some degree, I do believe in discretion. However, I think it should be limited, so it's not, limited, so that someone doesn't come and say, I know so-and-so, so I'm gonna try to do my best to argue on their behalf. I want to get that out of the equation. At the same time, I want to take out of the equation someone who is very rigid and feels that, I don't care. I want them to have 5 days, I want them to shut down for a week, and that should be standard practice for everybody. I want to take that stuff out of the equation. And then there's room for subjectivity or objectivity. Discretion, thank you. Thank you. Anyway, that's my thought, but we probably should have that after July 18th of these meetings, but we should have it close enough so it's fresh in our memory.
Okay, so I got it clear. We're going to have the show cause hearing scheduled on July 18th. Can notify the appropriate offenders and the police department.
Right.
So I'd make that motion for Christopher's Ginger Gourmet and Ryer's, Mr. Chairman, that we issue notice to show cause and have them appear with regard to their package store wine and malt licenses on July 18th, 2016.
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Menapelli. Seconded by Mr.
But I thought
Yule.
there were 3.
Further discussion?
Oh, so she mentioned 2, Ryers and Ginger.
Christopher's.
And
Yeah.
Christopher's.
Christopher's.
yeah.
I apologize.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay. Ratify the memorandum of agreement.
Passing over that one.
That's passing over.
Liaison assignments is next.
Liaison assignments, so
So what have it, sentence 2.
what I've done, and I've lost them.
So,
I don't have those in my packet.
They're here. Too much went on.
so that was not in the
Couldn't have
packet?
disappeared.
It was, if you look at the liaison.
Oh, okay.
Any, what I'm proposing for the liaison assignments,
You put it in Dropbox on the liaison?
They're in Dropbox, yes. But I printed copies, here they are. And I'm only recommending a couple of changes. One was to put Steve on water with myself as his vice chair. Second is under economic development. Michael is a voting member on economic development, and I've suggested that we have one, because it's so important, we have a board member as a non-voting liaison, and I'm suggesting that that job go to Jeff. Would be a good opportunity now that he's not chasing down the gas company to take a look at what's going on over there and help out. And I took youth services. Kate, I know that you had a lot of difficulty making that meeting, their meeting schedule. So I put it under my name.
I think
Michael-
you'd probably have difficulty too, because they have it at the same time as our meetings are scheduled.
Yeah,
So you'd run into the same issue as I would.
Is that true?
yeah.
Yes,
Parks and Rec and Youth Services meet on Monday evenings when we meet.
at 6:30, when most of our meetings, virtually all of them were at the same time as our.
So what,
And you still couldn't make it?
I was unaware of that.
Yeah. They've been doing that
I mean,
for years, even when I was there.
are you able to continue communicating with,
Sure, I mean, obviously, if we have a meeting here,
you can't be there, I understand,
exactly,
yeah.
right.
But are you
But
communicating?
the liaison doesn't necessarily mean you go to every meeting, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, what's important is the communication with the
Sure.
committee,
Sure.
and primarily the chair.
Yeah. And for-
So,
At least for the rest of this year, I think we're on a second and fourth meeting.
yeah, there's
schedule,
some
so
opportunity
there may be some
perhaps.
opportunity for you to
Oh,
go
sure.
between now and the end of the year a few
Definitely.
times, but when they're in their first and third like
Yeah.
us, it's hard.
Right.
So, I'm going to ask you, do you want to continue doing that?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, then
Most
I will,
definitely.
I will change that back. And I think I added the Historic District Commission and Historical Commission to you,
Right.
Good luck.
Kate. One is, my thought was that they don't meet that often, and I don't know of any issues at the moment that are going to consume a lot of time. So one of the most important parts of our responsibilities as liaison is, one, in communicating with the committees, and two is when we're vetting appointees, that we find time to interview the prospective appointments and make sure that the committee chairman at a minimum is, at least you've had a communication so that we don't find out that they disagree and we create an issue. But we don't surprise them. That's what happened at Youth Services.
Well, I think they have a pretty formal process they use, a little different than most of the other committees.
Yes,
so
that's true.
Yeah.
they're, you know,
Yeah.
I think
It was,
one-
it was a double-edged sword
Well-
because the application never got from Jane's office to the committee chair, which is not a regular occurrence, so.
Yeah, I think too, one of our things that we discussed when we did our strategic planning meeting was encouraging volunteers to come forward for these committees. It's all volunteer work, so when there's a good candidate, especially someone that we know that we can offer in some sort of service to the town, that's a good fit, I think that that's something that should be encouraged and not discouraged, and that we should work with people that step forward to make a volunteer commitment like that. And not make a vetting process that difficult for someone to come and do volunteer service like this, especially great candidates that are stepping forward.
Well, but there's, there are some critical committees, like the Hillview Commission, okay, which is a business, right? And therefore, I think it's extremely important that the board take heed and pay attention in terms of either reappointments or new appointments to the committee. And I think that's true across the board. But in this particular
Definitely.
case that I'm referring to, that I ended up getting involved with because of the chairman asking for an explanation of what happened, it turns out that there were two particular things that occurred. One was he was unaware that there was a candidate because the application didn't get to him. And the individual that you recommended to the board showed up at a meeting, and they asked what she was doing there, and she says, "I'm your new member." And they didn't know it. The chairman didn't know it. So try to avoid those issues in the future, that's all. And I just bring it up is that, you know, we should, if you're the liaison, all of us are to a particular committee, and we're making the appointments, I think it would not be, I understand where you're coming from, but it would not be right if we didn't have a discussion with that person, find out, you know, why they're interested in joining. And, you know, sometimes people have agendas, and it may not be suitable for a committee. And we have the responsibility of making those appointments. We've had that issue in the past. Suggesting that what occurred at Youth Services, they're happy with the individual as far as I know. It's just that Peter never got a notice that there was a candidate until she showed up. I'm just trying to avoid that kind of thing in the future, that's all. So any other changes? Anybody before we lock this down? Okay, can we move on? I will update this. What Karen did last year, I thought was very good. She took from this list and she created another document, which is in, and she'll update it, which gave you the information from your committees as to who the contacts were and who's on the various committees. I thought that was very helpful.
That's great, yeah.
And next item, Town Administrator's Report.
Mr. Chairman, I will be brief. Just a note, the street sweeping has been completed, and I'd like to thank residents for cooperating during the process over the past couple of months. Second, in response to board discussion at a prior meeting, the Public Works Department has been repairing fire hydrants that are out of service over the past 2 months. So far, 9 hydrants have been repaired. 1 was being repaired as of the writing of the report last Thursday, and there were 4 that remained to be repaired. The bags that were identified during the board's discussion that have been seen around town replaced plastic bands that were previously used to denote the hydrants out of service. So there was a change in how we were identifying those hydrants, and the bags are a newer methodology, which is probably why they've been noticed. And again, we did have a number that were out of service, and we're in the process of getting them all brought back into service. As the board's well aware, and as has been publicized by our partners at the transcript, there is a stage 1 water use restriction that's now in effect for the town, and that results in odd even watering with residences that are on, that have odd street numbers are able to water on Tuesdays and Fridays, and residents that have an even number are able to water on Wednesday and Saturday. Finally, screening for the Public Works Director candidates, screening of the Public Works Director candidates continues, and we look forward to making an appointment shortly. And that concludes my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Mr. O'Leary, you want to start?
I guess we probably should have mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting, but obviously what occurred in Orlando, Florida is absolutely tragic, and you know, how you prevent it, everybody's searching for answers, but I think part of the answers include some sort of a better screening and gun control that needs to take place. It has very little to do with immigration as far as I'm concerned. But again, you know, biases, prejudices, people being targeted, it can happen anywhere, and it's tragic. I know that all of us feel badly, and our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Orlando and the victims and their families. But I think it's incumbent upon us as local leaders to, you know, start acting locally and ask our legislators, our state legislators, and our congressional delegations to really start taking some action. You know, and there's going to be a lot of discussion, obviously, at the national level, presidential politics being what they are at this particular time. I think we really need to focus on, you know, what can we do, starting locally, and get our state delegations to start acting at the state level, and then get our hold our congressional delegation accountable too for the lack of action on certain issues. And again, I think gun control is got to be a part of it. And nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to start what I have to say. I'm going to actually, it's in my notes as well, to talk about what had happened in Orlando, but I'd like to start by just having a moment of silence for the 49 people who have, I believe that's the number now, who have passed away, so if you don't mind. Thank you. Now, I don't look at this massacre as what kind of people have been murdered. I think of it as just people, for whatever reason, have had their lives taken away, first and foremost by an individual who had an agenda and wanted to put the end to their lives. And I think it needs to be said, because I do follow what's going on nationally. I do follow what's going on statewide and so on with regard to terrorism. And I think it's very important to understand that it is understood that not all Muslims are terrorists. And no one is saying that or implying such. And I think that's very important for people to understand. I have personal friends from Saudi Arabia who I know are very, very good people. And we must understand that there is bad in all nationalities, all religions, all political perspectives, and so on. But one bad person or a few bad people should not be defining an entire people. That should never be. And, you know, we're very fortunate in this country that we have a good response system to when circumstances like this occur. And I was listening to FBI Director Comey, and he described our first responders as tireless and extraordinary. And that's, to me, is an understatement for what the police do for us at the expense or risk of their own life. They don't ask any questions, they just go and do it. They don't know who they're saving, they're just saving people as best as they can. And they're trying to stop any attack, whether it's a terrorist attack or it's not a terrorist attack, or it's just a madman. And I think it's very important that we need to do a better job of educating our youth of the value of our first responders, be they the police or the fire department, okay? Because it's very, very important. We happen to have a very, very good police department here. And, I mean, maybe it's an aberration of the others. I don't think so, but I think many, many, if not 99.9% of police departments are extraordinary people. And we need to convey that, and we need to understand that they do special things for us. And I know that when I grew up, you went to a police officer, I was taught you go to a police officer because you can trust them and they will come forward and they will help you. Today, the police are getting a bum rap for what they do. There is no doubt there are bad police, just like there are bad Muslims, just like there are bad religious fanatics, but they should never, ever be allowed to define the whole. And I would reach out to our schools to have programs, and yet we do, but we need to do a better job of reaching out and letting the youth of America know, and specifically here in North Reading, know that the police are there to help you. They are not racists. They are not negligent in the job that they do. So I think that's very, very important. And thank God that there could have been more down in Orlando had it not been for the quick response and the careful response by the first responders in Orlando. And I'll leave it at that at the moment, but my prayers go out to everyone that has been harmed or murdered, and to the families. From what I've seen, the family of this murderer, they are having heartbreaks as well. So my primary point here is the few should not define the majority, and that we should recognize that we are very fortunate for the police force that we have here in North Reading. And I'll say this, and I say this because of my background. North Reading is a white town, and there's nothing wrong with it. It is what it is. We have to understand that we need to be prepared that if a situation occurs where a minority comes in to the town, and whatever the case is, mistake or whatever, it turns out there was an altercation and something bad happened to that person. We have to realize that we are as vulnerable as any other town. that one little incident, that careful little incident, can define us as a town. So the education of what the police force does for us, to our youth, is very, very important at this time. And I guess I would just have to leave it at that. Thank you.
Catherine?
I just want to, I would echo those comments too from Mr. O'Leary, Mr. Yule, and for me, I just want to say, it's a prayer, you could call it a collect, you could call it a thought, you could call it a poem, but if it's okay, and if I have the leave of my colleagues, I learned it when I was a youth in school. We said it every single day when I went to Girls Catholic. That was about 30 years ago. And sometimes in these times when there's not much you can do, it just evokes such a visceral response. And we've been in this situation now where we've commented on these kind of horrific massacres that there's really not much left to do but be in solidarity, I guess, with the victims and pray. And that's where I can find some maybe peaceful, peaceful, positive energy. So I'm just going to read it, and it's just a thought that hopefully will help. And it was actually called the Universal Prayer for Peace, and it goes like this: lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. And it's just to pray for some peace. And I agree with Mr. Yule. I think we do a good job in North Reading of inclusionary, especially with the elementary school. And there's so many amazing programs out there that our school personnel and our youth services are trying to teach kids to recognize the dignity in one another. The difference isn't a negative thing, and that they're human beings, their dignity in one another. And that is another prayer, I guess, or another wish, or another remark I could make about this entire tragedy. And that's all.
Anything else, Catherine? Michael?
No, of course, I will keep the victims and their families in my prayers and my family's prayers. I just hope and pray that this doesn't become the norm, and that's what we got to work at, and that's why it is a good suggestion that we continue to have our discussions with our political leaders to make sure they understand where we got to invest some money, so we can try to avoid these things from continuing to happen. And we just need to make the investments in the right areas so we can protect ourselves and our citizens. So hopefully we'll get there. But on a different note, I just want to follow up on an email I'd sent out to the board members in regards to the J.T. Berry. Just a quick little update on the J.T. Berry progress. So we received the appraisal. That's in, I'm not sure it's in an official format, Mr. Gilberto, if you've seen it yet.
I've not seen it.
I haven't
no.
seen it yet either, but I know it's done, and I know the market study is well underway, and we're hoping before the July 18th timeframe, we will have that market study completed. And I was hoping the July 18th meeting, seems like it's starting to fill up, especially with the hearings, to have a joint meeting with the CPC so we could go over the appraisal and the market study. And if that's just not going to work out, maybe it's something we can make sure we capture in the first meeting in August, if we could.
Well, I think it's important, Michael, and, if you have some idea of the time, I think part of our problem is hard as we try, is time management. And, we get behind and it just grows. And of course, we had, trying to be polite to a citizen tonight, turned into a longer conversation than I had hoped, but, that's the way it is.
I understand.
But, if we know a week in advance while we're planning out the agenda, it might be, I think it'll be worthwhile for all the board members to get an update of where we are with respect to the valuation of the property and any other new information that's come in.
So what would be presented is that TRA would come in, whether it's the 18th or the first meeting in August, They'd go over the appraisal with us. They'd go over the market study and share with you that information. At that joint meeting, we would we have to provide some guidance to the EDC and to TRA on how we want to market the property. But we also have that, we have a lot of interest in one particular company, which I've emailed you all the details on that. And, and it's public information since it was brought up at a public meeting, and so I'll just say it very briefly. It's, Four Kicks is a company who has locations in Taunton, Marlboro, and one other location that escapes me. They are very interested in the property, very, very interested, and they would, to the point where they'd like to try to get the town to consider an RFP, so they could close sometime in December, so they can open sometime in December of 2017. There's also a hotel that likes to travel along and build adjacent to this facility because it's so massive and has so much activity that the hotels are completely full, especially on the weekends. We're a little ahead of ourselves on it, but I just want to mention it only because I know they've been in now to see Mrs. McKnight. They've talked to her. They've been actively doing their own due diligence. They're spending their own money evaluating the site. We have to come up with, based on the market study, what the future use is for that property. I love it. I like what they're proposing. It's very informal, but, I don't have enough details to say, yeah, this is the way to go. And like I said earlier, we still have to follow our process and complete the market study, then discuss it as a joint committee where we would like to go. And maybe at that point, we like it and we go forward with it, or we just say, no, let's open it up to the open market and see what we get. And we can discuss that we don't have to discuss it this evening. I didn't bring it up there for a discussion. I just want to make sure everyone is up to speed, and make sure that when we can get this on the agenda, that we give it enough time to do it as a joint meeting.
Well, what I'd suggest is that we try to get it into an early, whenever you're ready.
We'll be ready by the 18th.
The next meeting, and that we use that format to get informed, and maybe limit the discussion and have a separate work session to talk about the pros and cons. I'm assuming that the market study is going to come back with a range of opportunities, not necessarily people that are interested in the property, but a range of the kinds of things that best fit in that location.
Yeah, it'll give you, TRA is going to provide based on their study, the best use.
Mm-hmm.
And where we would, but again, it's based on, there's going to be different views to it. What are you going to get? What's the best bang for your buck? Maybe you don't get a tremendous amount of sale price up front, but you're going to get a tremendous amount of revenue in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Or you bring in somebody like this Four Kicks likes to do. If you read about them, they're sort of an anchor to bring in others into those locations, a lot of different restaurants. You can see now with the location of where J.T. Berry property is, adjacent to Route 28. Route 28 would become very busy on nights and weekends as people are visiting our town to go ahead and attend events at this location. So it's those kind of things we have to look at, the big environmental impact financially, positively. And I think that's what we got to keep in mind. And we have done some draft numbers just to give some examples, which we'll try to present whenever we have our joint meeting, so people can get an idea from a financial perspective of what we're talking about going forward.
Steve?
I would just ask that the market study and appraisal be put in electronic form so that they can be forwarded sooner, or as soon as possible, to the members of the board, so we could
Yep.
get a chance to
They will
look at
be.
it and digest it, and that would be great.
Yep,
Great.
that's the plan.
Anything else, Michael?
Just check my notes. No, I really want to just quickly congratulate the North Reading varsity baseball team. They've made it now to the semifinals. And the game is on Wednesday evening at Frazier Field in Lynn. And I believe it's a 4 o'clock start. 4:30, so I hope the community comes out to support them. They're going to need it to play in East Bridgewater, and it'll be another special opportunity for their baseball team.
Great. You requested that we provide a certificate to a new Eagle Scout. Michael, can we put that on our agenda for the next meeting? And we'll draw up a certificate. Will you
That would be
invite
great.
the family?
I will
and
invite
we'll
the
do
meetings
that.
for the
We'll
July
do that
18th.
early, yes.
I will do that, and Representative Jones have also sent them one as well.
Okay, great.
So I'll offer to Representative Jones to come in that evening, present it to
Yeah.
himself personally.
So,
Excuse me, Bob, did they do the Eagle Scout presentation already?
that I don't know.
It's on the-
Michael
it's on the
informed me of the
17th.
request.
It's going to be on the 17th, so when he comes in here on the 18th, yes, it'll be completed.
Okay, normally we get an invitation to go to that, I guess.
It's coming.
That's coming, okay, great.
So reflecting on what happened in Florida, it came across to me as a total shock, and primarily because my wife and I were vacationing up in New Hampshire, and we didn't have our computers, we didn't have, we were totally oblivious to what went on until all of a sudden it just hit us, and it hit us from the point of view I gather over time. There were bits and pieces that came out, and we got it all at once. It's pretty sad. The internet to me is a double-edged sword. It's a tremendous tool for communications to gather information, but it's also at the center of some of what's going on. And I don't know how you fix that, because you either turn it all off and have nothing, which isn't going to happen. But the ability for instantaneous communication to build hate up instantly and to propagate it, it's just so easy to do today, and that's a big part of the problem. And as a nation, somehow we have to find a way of solving that problem. And I think it does come back to the basic roots of how we educate our kids and how we bring them up. I won't say any more except that I wish all those families that have been impacted by this the very best of my condolences. With respect to our meeting schedule, Michael, do we have anything coming up that we need to, beyond the contract negotiations, and anything we need to cover that we should be thinking about?
I think that the kind of unresolved issues will largely get addressed the session on Monday night, the 20th, from my estimation. I can't think of anything further right now.
Okay, water's behind us, town meeting's behind us, close out of the year.
We had the one transfer that we were looking at from a standpoint of the budget, which was approved tonight. We are not forecasting any others at this point in time. If that changes, we'll certainly let the board know, but we've been looking pretty closely and scrutinizing the budgets to make sure that we're going to get to the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, good. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
There a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yule. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? I will update this list